believer in grace. I'm a big believer in getting people back on their feet. I run the largest addiction treatment center in the county.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
We are live, guys.
Nice.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a big deal for
It
me.
is.
Welcome
It's
to the
huge.
Hopeaholics podcast.
Yeah.
Today we have the sheriff
Sheriff
Of-
Barnes.
of
Yes.
Orange
Yeah.
County.
I mean, it's crazy.
In the house.
Yeah. It's kind of scary too.
Well, it's weird because you grow
All of
kinda-
us except for
official.
Shane has been arrested by you.
Yeah. Well, you grow up running from the police, like just naturally. It's a natural.
I know. I actually
phenomenon.
played cops and robbers,
Yeah.
and I played the cop.
Yeah, well, it's a phenomenon.
I-
though. Everyone runs from the police. It's just how it is. Here we are.
Well, not
Full
everybody's
circle.
running from us anymore.
No.
We're doing a pretty, just the sheriff's department alone. I'm blessed to have great people I work with every day.
Yeah.
But it's funny you said that because you say running from the police. I will tell you, some of the nicest people I ever met were people entrusted to our care within our jail.
Mm.
And notice I said people, not inmates.
Yes.
These aren't numbers; they're names.
Mhm.
And so we are doing a lot of really great, innovative things. So much so that our jails just recently got recognized by the National Institute of Correction as the mega jail
Wow.
and programs that we run,
Wow.
especially programs we'll probably talk about here today
Yeah.
that should be emulated nationally. We're doing a lot of really good work.
Awesome.
I have to say it was really cool for all of us to walk in to the town hall. Obviously, that's where we got to see you, and you spoke so well. I haven't seen a elected official speak the way that you spoke that night. Not only obviously because the topic was extremely serious of what's going on. However, not to talk bad about anybody else, but I just feel there was so much
Fluff.
assertiveness with yours.
Yeah. Sorry.
And you have actual factual numbers that you're giving out, and I think that's important because sometimes you listen to other people talk, especially something so powerful with the fentanyl crisis that's happening, and then others will stand up and not exactly know certain factual statements, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's part of the issue that's probably troubling today is, just a little bit of background. What got me into this fight, going back to 2015, sheriff's department, large sheriff's department here in Orange County, have a lot of different responsibilities, and one of them, I'm also the county coroner. It's a dual office, so I'm the sheriff coroner of the county, but I also run the Orange County Crime Lab. And in 2015, our crime lab recognized the first presence of fentanyl west of the Mississippi. And knowing how drugs work, drug trends work, we could see this coming. We should have seen this coming. In fact, the data shows we should have seen this coming straight at us since 14, when the numbers really started to climb for fentanyl-related deaths in the United States. So we've been in this since 15. We deployed the first naloxone program in the state. We started training other people how to do that. Every deputy that goes out into service has naloxone with them. We're going to the 8 milligram from the 4.
And that's basically just another name for Narcan?
It's Narcan.
Okay.
It's a nasal Narcan.
Okay.
And it goes by different trade names. We started with naloxone. Now it's on to the new, I can't remember the new trade name. That's the 8 milligram that we're going to.
Yeah.
All of our deputy coroners have it because they're doing death investigations oftentimes with fentanyl present. Our crime lab that does evidence collection has it as well. And every deputy sheriff that works in the jail has it in close proximity because jails are notorious for drug trafficking issues. And we've had over 500 saves using this program over the last now 9 years. And it's climbed because the presence of fentanyl has climbed. So seeing how this was manifesting within the community, got into the world of trying to change legislation, trying to change some of the programs, educate people on what the risks are. We've changed our drug education program around the presence of fentanyl in the community to be a life choices program, not a scared straight program. The scared straight programs don't work.
Yeah.
No.
In fact, many times what the scared straight programs do is it teaches kids how to use drugs rather than,
Yeah.
it's not what you're hoping, the outcome you're hoping for. So we've gone way in on all of these different arenas and had forums. I just spoke last week at a debut of a film that was brought out called Come Back Home, I believe, from Amy Neville and her losing her son, Alex, and had another panel there, and it's just, if not for COVID, this would be the issue, and it's now emerging as the issue. But now it's quite honestly 8 years too late. We should have seen this a lot earlier and seen what the impacts were going to be. And keep in mind, we talk about the deaths, 107,000 deaths. Over 70% of those are fentanyl-related deaths. By the way, up from 4% in 2014. 4% in 2014 of all the narcotics-related deaths nationally were fentanyl. That's 1 in 25. It went to 40% in 5 years.
Wow.
2018. So when I say we saw this coming, there were some pretty good pre-incident indicators of how this trend was manifesting, and then all the other things happening south of the border and around makes it that much more difficult. So we've been fighting the good fight, and I will tell you that as the county coroner, as the state continues to rise, and it's kind of plateaued, but it's still going up about 2%, we saw a 6% reduction in 22. So it's hopefully a good trend to start bringing those numbers back down, at least locally, but we hope that those continue to change, across the region and the state.
What I remember in when you spoke at the town hall was you had mentioned how you saw this coming in 2014, and it seems like you've been a huge voice and trying to let people know. What do you think was the main issue, I guess, where 8 years later it's like, yeah, I basically said this was coming and we didn't do anything about it? What do you think was the barrier? Just lack of knowledge, or?
I think it was, I don't know if it's lack of knowledge. I think it's lack of acknowledgement. There was just this resistance to acknowledging that this was an issue. There's I don't know if you ride motorcycles, but there's an adage there's two types of motorcycle riders: those who have crashed and those who haven't crashed yet. Right. So everybody knows somebody who probably has been in a motorcycle collision. Well, when it gets to fentanyl, it's somebody or you don't know somebody yet, because it's that prolific. Where I doubt you can probably find anybody now who doesn't know somebody or a family or a friend who hasn't been impacted by the fentanyl crisis. So it's that, and I think that you summarized a little bit earlier about some of the people you see who are in this arena now trying to change things. I don't think it's the sexy political platform to be on. I really don't. I don't think it gets people the attention, or if you're a political person, the platform to win on, because it's such a big issue and they have to fight it on so many different fronts. I was fortunate, and I apologize because I don't remember what we spoke about at that panel. I think I've done 5 panels since then.
Of course. You're a busy guy.
Well, I'm busy, but I put my energy where it matters. And this is where it really, I think, matters most. But probably about 5 or 6 months ago, I was invited back to the White House with ONDCP, Office of National Drug Control Policy. It's the drug czar. And Dr. Gupta, we had a 2-hour conversation, and then he had to leave. He was only supposed to be there half an hour. I got to give him credit. He stayed in the room for 4 times longer than his time allowed, and his staff kept on saying, "Doctor, you have another appointment." He goes, "No, this is important. I need to be here." And he stayed through that conversation. He had his the other executives from ONDCP were in the room, and we're talking about, I can't cover it was a classified briefing, so I can't go into all the things discussed, but not everything there are things that I know you're aware of: the trafficking issues, the precursor chemicals from China. And we talked about all these different things. And I was a little shocked because when we were finished, one of the individuals in the room said, "Sheriff, thank you for your time. We now know what we need to do. We need to do this one thing." And I said, if that's what you got from the conversation, it's not that one thing. It's that one thing and 11 other things simultaneously. You're playing whack-a-mole. If you just do one of these things, the problem is always going to shift around you. And what I told them, and which has been very important to me, I believe, I ended with, as you talk about precursor chemicals and these transiting through U.S. ports before they even go to Mexico, we have opportunities to intervene and really disrupt this issue, the drug trafficking issue. And I ended with, the last thing we need to do is you have to deal with the addiction issue north of the border. As long as there is a demand for this narcotic, the cartels will always rise up to meet it. with supply.
Sure.
You can take El Chapo out and you can take El Mencho out, and there'll be a new head that will just keep on driving this, and it'll always be met because of the demand we have. And I'm a big believer in grace. I'm a big believer in getting people back on their feet. I run the largest addiction treatment center in the
Yes,
county.
you do.
Yeah,
By
you do.
default, it's the
Yeah.
Orange County Jail.
Yeah.
Right now in my care, I have about anywhere from 3,200 to 3,300 people who are incarcerated in the Orange County Jail. On any given day, I have 950,000 people on MAT, medication-assisted treatment, and we did this for years. That's millions of dollars of costs invested into a program to get people into sobriety, and we're doing things that are a little innovative now. When people leave our custody, we send them out with medication. They get 10 to 14 days of medication to go with them to bridge the gap needed to go back into a program, so they're not just stopping cold and trying to wing it in some way. So it's all these things that have to be done simultaneously. I have 100 to 120 people every day that are on medication-assisted detox of alcohol, drugs, or a combination of both, because it's that prolific of a problem.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about when somebody comes in, and especially if they're addicted to alcohol or benzodiazepines. Have you guys always assisted with medication detox for people that are true severe alcoholics or true people that are addicted to benzodiazepines?
Yes. Well, yes and no. If somebody has such a severe medical problem, we have a leased wing of a hospital that's in a custody setting.
Okay.
So they can go to a hospital setting if it's beyond the capabilities of the medical or mental health staff that work within the jail. And that's a decision they make. We don't make that decision. They get triaged when they come in, and if there's something serious, either in the vital signs, they'll get referred to a hospital, have to be cleared, or they'll be booked there and held there until they can be safely transported back to the jail and held in the jail. Obviously very costly endeavor to have somebody under guard in a hospital.
Yeah.
Right.
And right now, the way the laws have changed, which has consequence, by the way. Somebody coming to jail for an addiction issue is not common anymore because of some changes in California law. Now, the downside of that is, before 2014, now it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since Prop 47 passed. Before 2014, you could get arrested for possession and come to Orange County Jail. Now you get a ticket and you stay out. And the downside of that is there's nothing to incentivize people to try to get care, to try to get into services or programs. In California, we always had Prop 36, PC 1000, drug court. You had to try really, really hard to come to jail for a drug possession case. Now they're out. When Prop 47 passed, I had families calling me saying, please take him back, he or she, take our son or daughter back into custody. It's the only time they ever got clean was when they're inside the Orange County Jail, and the law does not allow us to do that anymore. And I'll be clear, I'm not advocating for incarcerating the drug addicted. I'll advocate till my last dying breath to create programs to off-road people into before they decline into criminality other than drug crimes. But once you get in the criminal justice system, it's very hard to get back out of it. You have all these things that kind of follow with you, not to mention impacts on whether you can maintain your employment, you maintain your housing, your families get disrupted. It's not just the individual that gets impacted, it's entire system of people that gets impacted.
But I think you can swing it both ways too, because on the other end of the spectrum, where you're saying, you can, now you're just getting tickets for possession or whatnot, where before I had a nice little stay in Orange County Jail myself. But I think it was important for me because it also was a wake up moment for me. Like, I have a problem. Like, this is not where I am supposed to be. And I don't know if that would really kind of hit as hard as just getting a ticket, where it's like, you show up and it's kind of, it's not going into and being incarcerated. I don't think anybody wants to do that. So the fact of going through that process is, I guess in my case, it was important.
I look, this is purely my opinion. the pendulum has swung too far.
Yeah.
I'm from the school of, the first time I got arrested for a little tiny piece that big of methamphetamines, it was a felony.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately got arrested. I was released same day with a court date. I got PC 1000. A good addict like me, we signed the paper and then we don't show up for the PC 1000 because I was addicted. Rearrested. Did 90 days in Glen Helen in San Bernardino County, and that was my first stint at getting sober.
Yeah.
And there was consequences to my actions, eventually leading me to drug court, and eventually me staying clean. Your hands end up being not just your hands, but like our hands. We have to hope that the addict wants to finally come to treatment without the courts intervening and saying, "Hey, you need to go to treatment for a year." I don't like it.
I think the data here now, the time, it takes 13 months.
13
actually
months.
longer than it takes 13 months.
Chad was saying 18 months before. That was your thing.
Well, it depends on the person, but I
Right.
think what you two are talking about is what would be referred to as a significant emotional experience, something that jars you into reality, says, I can't stay on this track, I need to change. And for example, I talked about the young kids that were on the panel discussion last week that lost siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of them lost a brother or sister, one lost a mother. That would be their significant emotional experience. And they spoke so eloquently. I mean, they have wisdom beyond their years. They're 13, 14, 16 years old, and they're talking about the subjects like we're talking about it. They were deeply and forever scarred from their loss. So they're talking from a completely different emotional base.
Yeah.
Not only that, and one of them, it was so frustrating. It was Amy Neville's daughter who lost her brother, Alex. And she goes, I asked about their peer group, how this is manifesting within schools. And she said, it's frustrating because I still see people taking pills.
Mm-hmm.
I share my experience. I share what my brother went through. He took a pill, thought it was Xanax, I believe, right? We talked about it's not laced. It's a binding agent with fentanyl pressed and colored to look like Xanax, and sometimes looks much better than pharmaceutical Xanax. But she said these kids are still consuming these pills knowing the risk, which is difficult because if you know the adolescent developing brain, it will never happen to them. Mm-hmm. They will have this belief, it will never happen to me. They're invincible. It's because they can't weigh the risk with the potential.
Which throws me right. I'm sorry I cut you off. Which throws me right into something else. What is the family obligation today? I mean, it's shifted quite a bit, or it's shifting quite a bit. I mean, so say you have your 15-year-old. You know that he's dabbling in Xanax. Mm-hmm. He's getting it off the street.
Every one of them will say none of them knew.
I know.
Let's do a hypothetical.
You mean the family never knew?
The family never knew that they were consuming these.
And we did have Amy on our podcast.
Yeah. All right, so I'm just thinking, like, what does a family do? So you say the kid's smoking weed. Let's go to weed. Even weed is not a recreational drug you can get off the street anymore. Mm-hmm. There's fentanyl laced in the weed. What do you do if your kid's 16 and says, hey, I want to smoke some weed, I'm getting it off the street? What is the family obligation there?
Part of the challenge, let's just talk about weed for a moment. And the argument about weed as a gateway goes back and forth.
Right.
The two things that we know now, first, I've been deep in adolescent programs for decades.
Mm-hmm.
I ran them in the sheriff's department when I was a sergeant. And we have great off-ramping programs where you get caught with something. It's not intended to be punitive with juveniles. It's intended to be restorative or get them into a better place, making better decisions. It's not intended to take them and put them in juvenile hall.
Yeah.
First of all, if a juvenile go to juvenile hall, it's got to be super serious crime.
Yeah.
But so you have these kids that before Prop 47 or before medical marijuana, now recreational marijuana, they would oftentimes get caught and go into programs for better life choices. Now it's legal. Well, first, it's not legal. It's still federally not legal. In California, It's been decriminalized away from being a crime. But if to get kids into programs now for marijuana is almost far and few between.
That's what I'm saying. It's
Because
almost impossible.
It is impossible
Yeah.
because parents don't see it as
Yeah.
they see like cigarettes, or they bought a
How about
they pimped a beer up
insurance
from it.
companies? Do they see it? I mean, if someone comes in just with weed, are you getting like, what are you getting?
It's tough. It's tough to get somebody residential treatment.
Yeah.
You
Or
can you can
even
get
detox.
outpatient. No detox.
No
There's-
detox.
Detox isn't happening.
That's not
Well,
happening.
and so I
marijuana.
think I'm probably the oldest one at the table. I'm going to go off on a limb and make this prediction. But we probably grew up in a similar era,
Yeah.
where I call it the Cheech and Chong years.
Yeah.
That's when I
Yeah,
grew up. I grew up
100%.
in the 70s, 80s, and that old joke about the big Cheech and Chong joint
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
as big as a submarine sandwich. Well, the THC now it's off the chart.
Off the charts.
And what we would see, the illnesses that weed is supposed to cure in the adolescent developing brain, there's now science that says it's causing the problems it's supposed to be treating,
Right.
between psychosis and all these
Yeah.
other things. because
Anxiety,
Anxiety, all that.
psychosis,
Yeah,
pushing, even the adolescent brain, or a not fully developed brain of a 20, 21, 22-year-old. We're seeing in the treatment centers them being pushed over into schizophrenia from the high levels of THC and not coming back from that. That's a subject that I debate with and talk with psychiatrists, and I ask them, is it would they have developed these symptoms if it wasn't for the weed? Is it bringing the symptoms on at a younger age, or is it the weed that's pushing them into that? And many of them agree that it's the high levels of THC.
it's high levels of THC. Plus, you have when you're a teenager, the effects of some of these narcotics, when you introduce them, it's magnified. There's a synergistic effect because of their development. They're still in this development stage. So you take you can with caffeine, with nicotine, with fentanyl, THC, and there's a magnified effect among a younger person because how present all these their body's developing, and addiction is it's a cruel illness, and once you start tampering with homeostasis in your body, I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm on my 35th year. I start my 36th year coming up in a month, and I met a lot of great people, and I met a lot of addicts. And when you talk about addiction to somebody who's really, really addicted, they will tell you, I'm not trying to get high anymore. I'm trying to get back to normal. I'm trying to get my body back in alignment where I'm not struggling and suffering. And they're doing that because the dopamine and all the neuroreceptors have been interfered with, and they're just trying to find balance in their life. And in every one of these addicts, if you asked them, raise your hand if you said you want to be an addict when you grow up. Nobody ever says that. It happens by default by making bad life choices that end up rewiring their system. And now they're trying to chase, feeling normal for the rest of their life.
Yeah, and I want to jump back to what the 13 months, right? So the damage that we do to the brain, even this is older people's brain, like my brain as an adult. Although I did get addicted to crystal meth when I was 13 years old. Back then we called it speed. You probably remember that. First time I did speed was in 1988. It was not the speed that I did in 2001 when I relapsed. Totally different ball game. That's when it had gone down to Mexico into the super labs, and it came back in this large crystal meth form. Prior to that, it was just
Way stronger.
For sure.
But no,
I
it's
used
clean
for,
though, right?
I used for 10 years speed. Never progressed from snorting it to smoking it to intravenous use. Never had a psychotic episode. Got clean for 3 years. Relapsed on the new super meth. And I swayed the Bush-Gore election in a psychosis. I swayed it. I was really in a meth-induced psychosis. It was my first mission that I did for the CIA as a fully blown meth addict in full psychosis. And Ever since that moment, anytime I put methamphetamines in my brain, I would go into a psychosis and I would do missions for the CIA. You're laughing because you've seen people coming into
Sure,
the
yeah.
jails like that all the time.
I'll tell you this funny. It's not a funny story. It has a little bit of comic to it.
Yes.
comedy. We had a gentleman who was under PCP. This is going back to a much younger version of me.
Yeah.
And this guy was big. You think like the Green Mile big.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
was a
wow.
big guy. And he's under the influence of PCP. And you know that you have to keep them calm. You don't want to rile them. And so he's being completely cooperative. We're talking to him. He's talking to us. And after about 45 minutes with him, he looks at us, and there's like 3 or 4 of us around him. And he goes, he's been singing hymns the whole time. And he looks at us and he goes, "You guys sing a hymn." And we all broke into "Jesus Loves Me" just like that. It's
Oh
like,
my
whatever it
Holy
takes, man. We do
Jesus.
not
Yeah,
want
yeah,
this
yeah.
guy
Yeah.
to go anywhere
Yeah.
but cooperative. But, they were used. The thing that troubles me about the story that you shared is the incidence of people having those types of
Yeah.
outcomes. It's increasing. And so we talk about addiction, and there's a lot of other factors at play, and the homelessness issue is one that comes into
Yeah.
mind a lot,
Yeah.
which we've been trying to resolve for some time. And I've told people don't become homeless and they become addicts. They don't become homeless and they develop mental illness. It's one or two of the other of those things that result in somebody ending up in homelessness. And so if you look at how we can kind of go wind back the clock, get that Wayback Machine and go, what do we need to do up front, not only to prevent incarceration, not only prevent addiction, to prevent all these things. There's a lot of other unintended consequences or outcomes that occur through all these things, homelessness being one of them. Mental illness and drug addiction goes back and forth, which cause what?
Yeah.
There's sometimes, dual diagnosis between
Yeah.
between the two. But if you solve a lot of these things early on, a lot of the bad outcomes gets avoided. And I would argue that I could probably reduce my jail population by 20% by just getting people into the appropriate services that don't exist, by the way, which has been a different issue that I've had with some of our members of Congress that I brought up and I will bring up. But if you really want to solve some of the problems that we're dealing with, you have to go back to what's the root cause, what's the causal factors, and intervene much earlier and probably at much greater investment and reduction in cost. Because when somebody gets deep into these systems,
Yeah.
It's like
it's you're talking
Yeah, but it's-
tens of hundreds of thousands of
it's
dollars.
so difficult when you're the parent or parents of that child, where you say start early. Just like these ladies who said they never knew their kid was using a pill, they never knew their kid was smoking weed.
The problem with where we are today, and I'm not trying to big league on this topic. Parents aren't raising kids.
No, they're not.
This is
100%,
the
I
parent.
agree.
This is
Oh,
the
you're
parent
right.
raising
Yeah.
kids
You're
right
right.
now. So
Mostly single families.
And I also think
40%
we have
divorce
to
rate
remember
nowadays.
too. I think if parents know, they don't want to. They
They don't-
pretend like
yeah.
it's very hard.
my
and
kid.
exactly, not my
Yeah,
kid.
yeah.
It's not happening.
They're going through hormonal changes.
Yeah,
This is typical teenage behavior.
I will tell you,
Sometimes it is.
when you say "not my kid," there's just this lack of there's a denial
For sure.
in accountability. And when I was in school, if I did something in the classroom, like teachers, they called.
Oh
home.
yeah.
I had I was going to pay.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness,
you're-
for sure. We
now
talk about
it's
it all
you-
the time.
Now parents argue with the teacher about how my
Mm-hmm.
kid would never do that, even though they could be on video doing it. Well, my kid would never do that, and it's
Yeah.
just I don't know what reality we're living in anymore. It's
The
it's
Kardashian
very
reality.
frustrating.
I kind of like just piggybacking on kind of what you said earlier when
true.
you said about you were in at the White House or in Washington D.C. and you were talking about the fentanyl crisis, and then an individual came up to you and said, "Oh, I know what I need to do," saying it was like as if it was one thing, where it is so much more than that in the sense of, okay, so you get released out of being incarcerated, right? And you had maybe a 14 day, maybe 30-day stint. And then what? Well, I'm going into insurances, right? So you have insurance, say you're a mom, you want to get your kid into rehab and you have great insurance. Well, these insurance companies only want to give you like 7 or 14 days and then expect the parent and the family to then go pay out of pocket. Where I thought healthcare is supposed, like, what are we doing? You just saying 13 months where how did I'm like, where is the disconnect in insurance companies only wanting to provide 7 to 14 days of care, and then we have
And then they're
really,
ready for
like, 13 months.
outpatient.
Yeah.
So the problem is I mean, and that's just, this is the private sector, right? The private sector is lost touch with reality now, because I've been doing my treatment centers for 21 years. So back in the old day, we were a cash pay, and people would stay a lot longer. We would step them down. We would, residential to, outpatient to sober living to, teach them about the 12-step community, get them into meetings, get them involved, and they would be around for a year. Early days of insurance, we could easily get 6 months, right, Shane?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then I will say, and I'll be the first to admit, that our industry, the private sector industry, abused
they did.
the Parity Act and the Affordable Care Act, and some really bad people got involved in this industry, and they overused insurance companies for quite some time. So now we're paying the price of that. Nowadays, we'll get 3 to 5 days of detox. On a good insurance policy, we'll get another 20 days of residential treatment, and then they want to step them down to an outpatient. They're really not clear enough to be at home, taking their own meds, getting to their appointments on time. They're not ready for that yet.
Yeah, they're in rehab. Clearly, they're not making.
You
very
need a
good
60,
decisions.
90-day step down. But here's the thing that I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me with the insurance companies, because they'll continue to pay these higher priced over and over and over again for a client, when we could actually give them really good care for a year to 13 month in a step down process.
So it depends on the perspective. And so I see this all the time, and and it bothers me. One, the latter, the more expensive, that's an expense. The former is an investment. So you're investing in a much lower cost model by getting them into sobriety, hopefully for long term and for life, which you then can count on that realized gain by not the more expensive components of the system, by getting them into the hospital or ER or whatever it may be. But it takes a mindset. Are we going to invest in these programs, or are we going to play defense and just wait for bad things to happen and be responsive to it, which happens a lot. One of the things I've been advocating for with Congress is the Medicaid Inmate Exclusion Program, MIEP. And what that means is you can't use any type of Medicaid in California, Medi-Cal, in Orange County, Cal Optima, for people who are incarcerated. But the vast majority of people I have, a good portion of the people I have in custody, aren't convicted of a crime yet. So we're trying to get that exclusion removed, so when somebody is in my care
Prior to trial.
Right, we can get them the services they need, or more importantly, if they get released, I can't sign them up for Medicare in 12 hours when they were in the schedule to be released if they get released for some reason. Now we can get all those dots connected before they leave.
Yeah.
Think this way. So people coming through the jail today, think a high school guidance counselor. What are your needs? Mm-hmm. How do we connect you to those services, right? And so they just walk out the back door. It's we saturate them with service offerings, programs, connectivity. We have a new jail coming up online. It'll be open probably around June, July, and it's a reentry facility for people who are knowingly finishing their sentences. They go to this place, and they get geared up for the next step in their life. Which is
do we know where this place is yet?
Yeah, it's the James Music Facility.
Is it really?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not the same place you probably remember. that one's been closed.
So this is almost like a reintegration into society kind of a thing.
It's very intentional. And that's why I say these are names, not numbers. Before it was, you do your time, walk out, and those people still exist. We still have people that we try our best, and they will walk out of our release and they go, I can't wait to go get high.
Yeah.
I'm going to go find. What they don't realize is their tolerance is significantly reduced because they've been in a facility for 1 month, 3 months, and they think what they're using is the same. Or you're playing Russian roulette with these pills
Yeah.
because we talked about how the cartels, when they press these pills, they look better than the real thing. They're just not really good at chemistry. As the county coroner, we've had toxicology come back on fentanyl death investigations. That's 36 times the lethal level of fentanyl because they just don't make good pills. They make them look really good. They're not really good at the chemistry of blending them appropriately. So you can get, this is the dangerous part. You take a pill, it's 1/36, right, of the dose you think you're buying. The next one might be 530, 1/5. And then you get the next one, it's 5 times or 10 times or 15 times. So we're literally playing Russian roulette with these pills. And people think that they're buying a Percocet or OxyContin or Xanax.
And I want to really clarify, because what you said, everybody gets it wrong. Including my son-in-law's death. He did not buy a pill laced with fentanyl. He bought a Percocet
that was fentanyl.
Yes. It was a pill that looked like a Percocet, but it was
all fentanyl.
All fentanyl.
No Perco.
There was no Percocet in it.
Nothing.
That bothers me because it's routinely reported that way in the mainstream media. A Xanax laced with fentanyl, an OxyContin laced with fentanyl. There's a binding agent in fentanyl.
Yeah.
And on the dark web right now, it's progressed so bad that they're not even advertising. They're openly advertising, this is Xanax with fentanyl. This is Percocet with fentanyl. Because people who are addicts are now seeking out fentanyl because of their addiction, and they can't satisfy it with an OxyContin anymore. They can't satisfy it with heroin anymore. It's got to be something that's powerful enough to deal with their addiction issues.
I mean, I think that's also a huge factor too, is our mainstream media, these headlines that are continuously coming out and we're seeing, makes it to the general public that aren't going to do their, show up to town halls and either know somebody, just think like, oh, poor addict, because you see a headline saying somebody had died from taking illicit fentanyl, when it's really not even showcasing what's really happening. I always think of the girl that died from thinking that she was taking Adderall. She was prescribed Adderall. She was supposed to pick up her Adderall. It was finals week. She was supposed to pick it up.
Harvard student.
That's messed up.
She was supposed to pick it up the next day, but her roommate, which was her best friend, and parents too, it's like kids are going to be kids. So, I mean, once you get out of the bushes and stop thinking that you were not 16 or 17 or 18 years old, then, we can start having serious conversations. But her best friend had gotten some Adderall because they're college students studying, and she took it and she died because it was fentanyl. It
was not Adderall laced with fentanyl either.
It was fentanyl.
It looked like Adderall. It was fentanyl.
If there's one message I would love to get into everybody's head, and it's this. It's over 99%. I'm going to round off to 100. 100%. If you're not getting it prescribed by a doctor, issued by a pharmacy, by a pharmacist,
by
in
a
a
U.S.
pill,
pharmacist.
Yeah.
it is. Let's just call it what it is. It's fentanyl. It is fentanyl. There's no, there's no delivery service that drops off legitimate narcotics. Well, actually, Amazon does now, so you can't actually get them through a pharmacy.
Narcotics?
Not narcotics, but prescriptions.
Yeah.
But you can't get OxyContin that way, or Percocet, or some of these drugs. It is 100% going to be fentanyl. Now if you know that, and we can get that message out to parents, their kids, your buddy is not selling you a Xanax, right, or an Adderall. It is fentanyl. You're buying fentanyl. You're consuming fentanyl. Alex, Amy Neville's son, he came to his parents and said, "Hey, I was taking this pill. I think he thought it was OxyContin. I can't remember what he was buying. He was buying fentanyl." He goes, "This thing has got a grip on me. I don't know why I am now. It just got hold of me." Well, it got hold of him because he wasn't taking a measured pharmaceutical drug. He was taking something he thought was going to satisfy the pain or whatever, and he was consuming fentanyl. And that's the message that we need to get out. The One Pill Can Kill campaign is great, but there's still this misbelief that I might be getting a legitimate narcotic if I buy it off of Drug Hub, which is Snap, Snapchat and these
I
delivery
couldn't believe
services.
that was a
Well-
wild, eye-opening experience for me, knowing that kids are just going on Snapchat.
It's
and
crazy.
That's insane. That's
Getting it delivered.
horrifying.
Well, that takes me back to the family. So now let's take it a step further. The kid's 19, 20, 21 years old. He comes to you and says, I'm taking Xanax. What do? I can't get off of it. Well, where are you getting the Xanax? I'm getting it off the street. Oh, red lights are flashing in my head. Now, I'm the parent. I know that the drugs are not Xanax on the street. I know it's fentanyl 100%. What do I do as a parent? Do I say, hey, let's go to the doctor, get a prescription. Here's some Xanax from the doctor. Like, it's such a tough, it's a corner.
It is.
You're backed into a no-win situation here.
I don't.
I don't think that's a no-win situation.
I don't think so
it's you hope it's a well-informed situation.
Yeah.
And you can there's resources that are readily available. First, for a parent, you have to have the relationship with your kid,
Yeah.
right? And Amy Neville did.
Yeah, she
She
did.
was doing all the right things.
She did.
What you didn't know is that he was getting this from a delivery service and got his last pill that way. But she was doing all the right things. He was going into rehab the
Right.
next day.
The next day.
You know,
Yep.
they're dealing with the loss of their son, and the phone rings. They go, "We got your son a bed." So they were doing everything right. And I think the one thing too that you mentioned, which is there's a certain amount of deniability we talked about. Right, this will never happen to my kids. Well, it will happen to your kids. If you're that naive to think that you got your blinders up, there's a strong chance if you're going to have an honest dialogue with your kids about how the world works today, there's a high probability they're going to make a potential life-changing, life-altering mistake. When my daughter went away to college, I'm not naive. This is a profession I am. I've dealt with people in crisis my entire life, good people in bad circumstances. And I talked to my daughter and I said, look, I'm not naive to think that you're not going to go to a party while you're at college. Here's the rules. You don't drink anything in a cup. If you open a beer, you possess that beer the entire time. If you set it down, that's not your beer anymore, right? Because people do stupid things.
Yep.
And I just had an honest dialogue. I wasn't going to be the guy that says, look, under no circumstances you're ever going to consume a beer at a party.
Sure.
That is an unrealistic expectation of a college student.
Yeah.
And she navigated life. I mean, she went through all that, and she's now, an adult and healthy. Both my kids are.
Talk to her about the pills.
Talk to her about pills. I shared experiences with my kids all the time because I'm dealing with these things in real time. Not like our deputies and peace officers are today. It's much more prolific. We've had 3 deputies inadvertently dosed by fentanyl powder in the line of duty. And fortunately for them, they had a partner there with them that could intervene with nasal Narcan.
I was going to ask you that. That was one of the questions on my list.
Wow.
But I think just that dialogue where it's very crystal clear is very important. I mean, I'm married to I'm the youngest of all boys, so it was that dialogue.
I'll just tell you, I feel sorry for your brothers because I'm pretty sure you can bring a can of what if you needed to. Yeah.
I mean, definitely, I did not like it growing up, and then once I got a little bit older, I was able to hold my own for sure. But my husband is so, I like to call him, he's a very logical man, and he's a normie. So bless his heart for being married to me. But we went to a Laker game last night, and I had a bottle of water. I set it down, and we went to go get some more snacks, and I came back, and I know better because it's been like ingrained in my head about the drink, and I've even said it to even women that I sponsor, because even just that alone is detrimental, especially for college students and women, because you go to a party, it's like, hey, can I buy you a drink? And it's like, do you see pouring in a cup? No, you didn't, so you probably shouldn't have it. If you set it down, you're done. That drink is over. So we get back to our seats, and I go, because I'm thirsty, I wanted to go have my water, and my husband looked at me like I had lost my mind, like that water's
She
done.
grabbed the water. I witnessed the whole thing. She grabbed the water and started to take it, and he ripped it back down, and he said, we left that drink here. It's not your drink anymore.
Like, you're done. And looked at me,
That's
and,
why I
like,
pointed
was
at him when
cuckoo.
you said that,
Yeah.
because that
So it
reminded
struck
me of
I'm
last
like, yeah, I know.
last
I'm
night.
married to-
But here's the sad thing about that, and that's obviously a very wise decision, but it's because you have become better informed because of the path life took you. And
Right.
so you can do that. The unfortunate reality is the vast majority of people who are subject to those tricks, those tactics,
Sure.
whatever, it's because they haven't had a bad outcome. And it's only then that they have the bad outcome, all these other things that come
And
with it happen.
The perpetrator can smell that.
Oh yeah.
They just
There's
smell
certain
that.
things, we teach a lot of classes to young girls about their safety, and there's just some things eye contact, maintaining eye contact,
Yeah.
walking with a purpose. If you talk to we're changing subjects here
Yeah.
a little bit, but if you talk to people that prey upon other people, they're looking for weakness. They're looking for somebody they know they can, dupe. They can get to do what you want. The human being is the only creature on the planet that will knowingly walk into danger when you sense it. They'll just rationalize away risk and danger because they don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings. They'll get in an elevator with somebody that they didn't feel safe getting in an elevator with, and they'll rationalize that away. And my thing is follow the spidey sense. When the hairs go up in the back of your neck, I don't care if I offend you. You just don't, you don't do things that put yourself knowingly at risk. And that's just where we need to be. Unfortunately, right now in this society and the way things are changing around us, you have to be better informed, right? I watched the podcast, so I know that what you're doing is putting out good information in the public space for the purpose of people to be better informed, right? Make better life choices. Else, you're going to be the next statistic. That's the unfortunate reality.
Yeah.
At least a high probability of
for
being
sure.
a statistic.
It seems now that we've changed the subject, it seems that that there might be a different breed of criminal out there selling these drugs that less care. I mean, I was growing up, you had a weed dealer. You would buy ecstasy, but people know there's.
They
fentanyl.
didn't sell heroin. Your weed dealer and speed dealer didn't also sell heroin
Exactly. Or fentanyl.
in my era.
Exactly. Or they didn't know fentanyl was in there and you could die from it. Here's a pill, take it.
I think part of that problem, you're right, and I think the issue today is you get these kids selling their kids are selling other kids fentanyl.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound naive to say that they don't know they're selling fentanyl. They know. They know at this point that there's a high probability they're selling illicit narcotics, clandestine produced fentanyl pills from south of the border. And they're doing it at blatant disregard for their friends at times and others for a pill profit. This came up recently. I don't know if we covered this when we had our forum, but about 4 or 5 months ago, there was a meeting with this administration and the president of Mexico, and pill production ceased. There was like a moratorium on pill production, and there's a big claim of victory that the fentanyl pills production's gone way down. That's not why that happened. The fentanyl pill production went way down because the cartels oversaturated the U.S. market with pills. There were some areas where you could buy a fentanyl pill for $0.25, and the price point for the cartels and their profiting isn't there anymore. So what do? It's narconomics. It's their narcotics economy. You bring back the supply to bring the demand back up. So now you're paying $7 a pill instead of $0.25. It was all about the profiteering of the cartels. The cartels don't care about American lives. The only thing they care about is how many billions of dollars they're going to make off human trafficking, sex trafficking, narcotics trafficking, with a blatant disregard for anybody north of the border. And that's just the reality.
I mean, they have it's proof that they have no regard for human life. Period. I mean, when they
That's evident in how they
handle their own people coming into our country, and the deaths that happen just that way alone. That's not even including the drugs.
Well,
just the human trafficking alone.
How do we not just put the Band-Aid
I'm glad
on?
you brought that up. Now, the dealer has changed. Has it changed because of the immigration problem? And have those dealers been swayed, by more illegals coming into this country?
So that could be easily perceived to be the issue.
Yeah.
First of all, you have to look at the cartels. The cartels today, they're not the 1980s, 90s cartels. They are Amazon.
Yeah.
They're very organized. They're compartmentalized. They have logistics. They have marketing. They're a Fortune 500 company, and they're operating like that. But they're very segmented. That if you're working logistics, you're not working here.
Yeah.
They keep it that way for a reason. If you talk about the crisis at the border, this is the cartels monopolizing on the crisis that we've allowed to occur. Nobody makes it to the southern border without the cartels profiting, either in human trafficking or narcotics trafficking.
Yeah.
But they're taking advantage of what is being billed as a humanitarian crisis in our country to take advantage of marketing opportunities, or I should say smuggling opportunities. So the reason all those kids were at the border, saturating the border, I think was half of CBP was being repurposed to babysit, and then they're doing end arounds with narcotics somewhere else because they realized they could very easily manipulate deployment and strategic positions of our three-letter agencies to their benefit by surging one spot where they could open up others. And it's just an unfortunate reality. But without getting on the topic of the border crisis, and this is not an immigration issue, I'm a firm believer in immigration, legal immigration. There's ways that you can come to the country and
I did.
and have
mom
done
did.
this. My mother did too.
Shane's an
Both.
immigrant.
Yeah.
My in-laws are, one's a first-generation immigrant, one's a second-generation immigrant to the United States. So there's ways that it can be done. In fact, the immigrants who are here that did it the right way, they're more upset about it than
Oh my
anybody
gosh,
else.
talk to my mom.
Because
So
they had to
I
go.
I can't wait till she comes on. I need to have her on because she's 4'11" Mexican lady. Don't get her started because she did it the right way and went for the American dream. And thank God she did, or else I wouldn't be here, or my brothers.
And I do want to just qualify my answer with, not everybody coming here has malicious intent.
Of course.
There are a lot of people, probably the vast majority coming here, that want to come and just get the American dream. And we want those people to have an opportunity to do that. But when you have a crisis at the border like we have, there's no doubt that we're going to have people smuggling narcotics. We have women. If you're coming to the southern border and you're a woman, you're told, go on birth control pill before you come to the border because you're going to be sexually abused in that trafficking up to the southern border. Jeez. It is a horrific environment that these people are being subjected to.
Wow.
But we also know we're only 2 decades out from 9/11. There are 157 people who were encountered at the border in the federal fiscal year of 22 were on FBI's no-fly list, terrorism watch list. Well, 180,000 people, I think, made it through there that they have no idea who they are. They're called gotaways. They didn't detain them. They just made it in to the United States. We should be operating in this country on the premise that there are known bad actors within the continental United States that have nefarious intent, not out of trafficking, but just they're bad people. They want to do harm to us.
Just to reiterate that, you said 180,000.
There was 80,000. I'm sorry, 140,000. It was 60,000 and 80,000 gotaways in the 2 contiguous fiscal years that just finished. October 1st started the next federal fiscal year, the October 1st to September 30th. And it was 60,000. It was a 33% increase to 80,000 this last federal fiscal year of people that made it in to the country. They have no idea who they are.
That is horrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
1.4 million. That's enough to be 79 11s. If you look at just that, if those math holds true, the 157 people who are on terrorism watch lists, and it could be for a variety of things. It doesn't mean they're Al Qaeda, but they're on watch lists.
You're doing math.
But if you extrapolate that math out to the 1.4 million, it's the equivalent of 79 11s, I believe is what the number is.
I have a
70?
question. I have a question for you though, because and not
A
to
lot.
get
Let's just say a lot.
not to get into like a political or Democrat, Republican, whatnot at all. It's more along the lines of you've seen a lot in you said 35 years?
35.
Okay. And obviously both that Democrat, Republican, whatnot, doesn't matter. But everybody that is in that position of so-called, I guess, power to make some changes, why do you think it's so easily happening that these are coming in and they just like vanish into thin air into our country? Like, I don't get that part.
Well, I don't get it either. You can't say we have a country and we don't have a border. I mean, you have to have a secure border in order to have the sovereignty of a nation, and you control people who are coming here. And it's not to say that we close the borders and nobody gets through, but you have to know who's coming into the country, what their purpose is, and you can manage that in a different way. So I also think that I think our federal government's broken right now. I think you see, just look the last several years, they're weaponizing the FBI to do things that probably is not. I have a lot of really good friends that work in the bureau, and they're frustrated. They want to do the right thing and do their job, but they're being repurposed onto these other investigations and looking at people, and it's unfair to them. A lot of them are leaving early. If you look at CBP and ICE, they want to do their job and protect us from people who shouldn't be here. And I'm not talking about the American dream chasers. I'm talking about people who have made it into the country 5 times, come in, commit crime, get deported, and come right back. And those are the people we need to have a better handle on, who are coming here and keeping them from coming back. We have an issue right now with the country of Chile. We have these Chilean South American theft groups, Chilean burglary crews, and they're coming.
They're here in South Orange County.
I briefed on this about 6 months ago with my partners across the country, and within about 30 days, these sheriffs, one from Oakland County in Michigan, which is where Detroit is, called and said, "Can you tell me about those crews again? I think I got them." They mobilize as soon as they know that they're being looked at.
They're gone.
They drop their IDs, they vacate their home, not their homes they own, but where they're staying, and they mobilize somewhere else and start all over again. And they're very organized crews. So we have an issue with, it's called the Esta Visa program, which is Chile is the only country in Central or South America that has this Esta Visa program. You can come here. They're supposed to be vetted in Chile, which they're not, and they put them on a plane. They come here, they drop their IDs, and they start committing crime. We should send them back, and they shouldn't be allowed to be here. And this is what drives me a little crazy. I'm gonna sound like getting on a little bully pulpit, but when we have people who are known criminals in this country from somebody else's country, we need to send them back. Every other country, if you're an American and you're in Germany, or you're American and you're somewhere else, you commit a crime there, guess what they do? They send you back to the United States when you're done, when they're done with you, and they don't let you come back in.
You can't even get into Canada with the DUI.
They won't even let me into Canada.
No,
Not that I want to go back. I've been there before.
I was able to get
Not
in.
that
It
Canada's
just took a
any
long
better.
time.
Did you have a
I'm saying,
DUI?
Can't
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
It was a pain. It was terrible.
And she was in the WWE. Did you wrestle in Canada?
I did, but I almost didn't twice. It was just such a nightmare. Sorry, sorry, Canada.
That's all right.
So this is all really good stuff. So like the last 5 minutes, Emily, mark that, because I was like,
But that's the.
I'm
thing.
so into that. I do want to dive back though really quick, because there's a couple of topics I wanted to discuss. One being, we're working hard here at the Hopeaholics, and just with everybody that we don't call people. We don't have people that follow us. Everybody stands beside us. That is a part of like our crew of Hopeaholics. We're really pushing the narrative of not calling fentanyl illicit. I want to be clear, illicit fentanyl an overdose, and calling it a poisoning, because there is no safe dose of illicit fentanyl. And anytime you buy a pill, we're being poisoned. Our kids are being poisoned.
And there's a potential for death.
There is a potential for death every time.
Yeah.
Well, if you heard me, I refer to them as fentanyl-related deaths. And I'll tell you why. And I've heard this argument, and I'm not going to tell a parent who lost a kid not to call it that. But I work in I'm in a different arena.
Yeah.
Poisoning is a specific intent crime. It means I gave you this with the intent of killing you. And it's hard to grasp this. The cartels aren't selling us fentanyl with the intent of killing us. They're just really bad at making pills. They're giving it with the intent of making a profit. I use this analogy. First of all, I'll preface this analogy with, I love my wife, but if I wanted to kill my wife and she's taking prescription Xanax, which she is not.
Right.
And I emptied her pill bottle and put clandestine produced fentanyl Xanax, or fentanyl that looks like Xanax.
Yes.
And there she takes, a pill, and then she passes away. And then I take the pills back out and put the real pills back in. That is a specific intent crime of poisoning. I intended to kill her by poisoning her. And I explained that to a group once, and I said, so when you look at how you have to prove a case,
It's too hard.
it can be done, but when you're talking about poisoning is a specific intent crime. As a county coroner, there's only 5 classifications of death that you can have: natural, homicide, suicide, accidental, and very rarely would be unknown. You can't figure out what it might be. Cause and manner of death is what we call it. The cause being what suicide, for example, the manner being by hanging would be cause and manner of death. There's no box for poisoning. Poisoning, it would be homicide, and it'd be up to law enforcement and the DA to prove it was by poisoning that person with a pill. That's the DA's responsibility in a criminal case. So that's a long way of saying I'm never going to tell a mother that their child wasn't poisoned. But in my world, it's a specific intent crime that is the result of somebody who wanted to kill somebody. If you look at just the term of, the cartels, I mentioned that their goal is profiting, but they're really, really bad at making these pills. I use the analogy. You probably heard the chocolate chip cookie analogy before. Have you?
No.
Okay, so when I talk about fentanyl, I will ask a group, how many have kids? Do you remember the first time you made chocolate chip cookies with your 3-year-old? Yeah. Would you agree that when they made those cookies that the distribution of chocolate chips was not equal? Right? One had 3, one had 13 because they're kids and they do their best. The cartels are making chocolate chip cookies. Really, they're 3-year-olds making chocolate chip cookies. One will have 3, one will have 13, one may have 30. They're really, really bad at being chemists. If you saw how they make these things, you would see that they're really, really bad at being chemists.
But then it kind of gets a little dicey, I would assuming, because Perla, who is a guest on
yes,
our,
I know
and
Perla.
you were she was at the town hall that we met you at, and I mean, obviously she was on our podcast, so people know her story, and I don't advise this, but a mother in pain is going to do whatever she possibly can to bring justice for her son, and she found out who was selling the pills, and then went to him and told him, let him know these are fentanyl, stop selling them. And then in that instance, now isn't it a criminal?
He said he knew. He said he knew that
Right.
it was fentanyl. Yeah.
They
then
all
he-
know
so
it's
then-
They all know
fentanyl,
they
and
do.
they all
So
know
we
that
started
they're
giving-
selling fentanyl.
We started giving the admonishment back in 15. 15? No, it's not that long ago. I'm sorry. 2021, January 21, we started giving the admonishment, just like the admonishment you get for DUI, right? You get them and you say, I'm going to read this admonishment. If you drive drunk or under the influence again, alcohol and or drugs, but if you drive impaired and you kill another person as a result of your driving impaired, you can be charged with second-degree murder. Do you understand? Yes, I do. We took it upon ourselves to create an admonishment for drug dealers, trafficking drug dealers. So when we catch somebody dealing, selling, we arrest them and we read that admonishment to them, and we do it on our body-worn camera, so it's recorded. We read this to you, you do this again, and it results in the death of another, The problem with the difference is one of them is called a walk-in advisement for alcohol, or DUI, I should say, because you can be DUI drugs or DUI alcohol, is required by law. There's some judges that won't accept our admonishment for fentanyl dealing because it's not required by law. And so you have to try to get it in as knowledge that what they're doing showed that it could result in the death of another person. The other challenge that we have is state statute versus federal statute for sales that result in the death of another, which is the federal statute, and the laws requiring a conviction for drug sales that result second-degree murder, basically, for California statute. The federal statute's a much easier statute to meet, much more easier threshold to meet. You sold me something, it resulted in a death. That's the law. If you sell somebody a narcotic or drug that results in the death of another person, that's the case. Now you have to do other things like try to get the evidence that proves it, like the phones, right? Which is the big issue I have with Snap and Snapchat, because I met with the executives of Snapchat probably 2 years ago, and they came in all kumbaya, we're with you, we're going to help you out. And I'm like, great, you want to help us out? Increase the time that you keep these messages to 72 hours minimally, right? Answer the phone when we call. Don't warn people that we're serving search warrants on them for their information, these things, and they never came back. They don't have an interest in solving this problem. They have an interest in profiting as a business. They put profit over people in this instance, because what we need from them is very, very difficult. And then you have end-to-end encryption on phones right now that's going to be much more difficult. We're trying to work with Section 240, I believe, that excludes these social media platforms from accountability if they participate in something that results in criminal activity. They hide behind the statute.
Right.
That needs to be changed. That's 2 decades plus old.
Yeah.
That needs to change, and let them know that if you are knowingly or have knowledge that something illegal is happening, you have an obligation to intervene. And to take that even further, when you look at end-to-end encryption, there are other countries that have access to phones because if you want to operate in one of these countries, you have to give them access. And I'm not looking at spying on people. That's not the intent. But when you have a warrant signed by a judge based on probable cause that says, I need to get into your phone, we need a legal front door. You need to be able to allow us legally into that phone to get the evidence to prove a crime. We're not looking for a secret backdoor to sneak in and spy on people, but it's got to be done with a warrant. And we're trying to change the laws there to force, Apple and Google or whoever makes these phones to give us an access point into the phones, which would be right now it's 6.5 months on average to crack a phone.
I mean, they have access already because I'll just be sitting here
Yeah.
talking about that washing machine that I
All of a
need.
sudden,
And all
here
of a sudden
comes
it
the
adds.
All of a
ads.
sudden, I've got an ad for a washing machine that I never even punched
Yeah,
into
so
my
where's that
phone.
information going?
I
Who's
think that
listening
there's
to
a
that?
little bit of irony in that statement because they're using all of their algorithms to watch everything you're doing, where you are, what you're saying, and at the same time, we're saying we just want to have a legal way in with a warrant.
Yeah, with a warrant.
With a warrant that
I'm
says
good with a warrant.
Yeah.
That's like,
Yeah.
because that is like
If you're breaking the law
if
and
you're
you're
breaking the
criminal,
law
yes.
and you guys have proven to a judge that you have enough for that warrant.
Well, part of that was part of the issue with Snap and Snapchat was we wanted to get into the victim's phones. And they're going, we have to notify the victim that you want on their phone. Well, the victim is lying on the floor deceased.
Dead.
So the clock is ticking, and you can't get access to this device. It has critical information. It's going to disappear in 2 hours. And that's part of the issue we face with some of these
Well,
cases.
I mean, part of the problem is too is like you got to have a platform that's big enough to have a voice that's big enough to, force some of these things to happen at what level? United States Congress?
I mean, it
Are
has to be.
they
I
the
mean, the
ones that
problem
have to
is-
make this law change?
Who's got more influence, me or Apple?
Apple does.
Yeah, because they have tremendous marketing influence and influence with members. I'm not saying that they're using their influence in that way, but I've got some influence. I've got a voice. I'll say what needs to be said, but I'm not a Fortune 100 company that can go out and
to actually
Plus,
shift
this
the
is
needle.
America.
See,
home
you
of
guys-
Then you
home of
wonder
the brave,
why.
Home of the brave, land of the free. You can't make these rules on companies.
No, but also too, the reason why nothing is happening is because too many people that are in positions of power, which we say I don't know who they are, but those companies and everything, they're all profiting off of all of this. That's why nothing is really happening.
What is going to happen is eventually one of these very influential
Yes.
members of Congress or somebody else
Spot
that
on.
is going to lose a son or a daughter.
Yep.
And when that
Or a wife.
happens, or wife, or they'll be impacted,
Yes.
and then the world will change.
1,000%.
The problem with that is every year we're adding 70,000 people. We're burying or cremating 70,000 people that don't matter as much
Sure.
in their world, and that's an unfortunate reflection of how politics works.
Yeah.
When you look at what our obligations are, and I'm not saying just me, I'm just saying when you have obligations. I know you guys care deeply about people. You wouldn't be doing this if you didn't. But you don't differentiate between socioeconomics or race or gender or whatever. You do it for the right reason, and you hope that you are making positive change. But you don't wait for that one really bad thing to happen to say, okay, now we can make a difference. Because you're way too late. You can't. Too many lives have been lost at that point. And it's just unfortunate that I've been screaming from the mountaintop since 15. I'm on year 9 of screaming about this. I had sponsored legislation for years in the California Senate and Assembly. I'll never forget I was up there. I don't know if I shared this story or not. I may have. I think it was 2018. I'm testifying in the Senate Public Safety Committee. Now keep in mind, by 18, there's already been a 10-time increase in fentanyl-related deaths nationally, from 4 to 40% in that 5-year span. 2014, 4%, 2018, 40%. That means on a national platform,
Yeah, that's crazy.
All the deaths, the causal factor of that drug-related death was fentanyl, and 40%. So it's already 10 times higher. We saw the trend moving. And I was testifying in Congress, and not Congress, in the state Senate, two senators on the Public Safety Committee, one looked me in the eye and said, this legislation is absolutely unnecessary. Fentanyl is always blended and trafficked with another narcotic. It's never trafficked in pure form, which we have confiscated over 400 pounds of pure fentanyl.
Wow.
And hundreds of thousands of fentanyl pills. I'm not going to call them by what their alleged trade names are in that same period. So that's just my department. That's not grade or law enforcement. That 400 pounds, we had confiscated, I think it was 39 pounds, one unit of my narcotics team last year. In one seizure, 39 pounds, that's almost 40 million illicit doses of fentanyl in pure form. The comment, always trafficked, always blended with some narcotics, so not related. The second member of the Senate said she stepped away from the dais, came back. She goes, I looked at the data, and people are not dying from fentanyl. That was her quote. People aren't dying from fentanyl. Well, I'd like to have her defend that comment today, 5 years later, because we've seen numbers go exponentially. It's been 2,400% increase in the state of California. We had an 1,800% increase, started at 37 up to 717 in 22, dropped down to 675 in the year following. So we've seen a little bit of a flattening and trending down, and I think it's because we've been spreading the word.
What do you see? What do you contribute to? What the word is? Naivete.
Naivete?
Yeah. What do you contribute?
It hasn't happened to somebody close
Because-
enough to them that it took
Well,
care of
but it's happening.
Here's the interesting thing. That week, I thought we were going to get that
These
bill
are
through.
public figures.
I know, but this is
That
what's
should
so
be
nuts to
reading
me.
and
Those two
understanding.
comments alone, how are you going to tell somebody whose boots are on the ground, literally seeing it himself?
Well, this is what I'm saying.
You heard you're not narcotics team, so that's like me telling a heart surgeon, no, you're wrong. He didn't have a heart attack.
Yeah.
When I'm not, that's not my.
Even
field.
if no, here's
That's
the thing.
insane.
No, you're a heart surgeon and you have a gynecologist. I mean, both MDs, right? But this guy's saying this, and
Yeah.
are you going to believe the gynecologist that this person doesn't have heart disease or
That was
didn't
better.
die?
At least they're both doctors. This one's in the Senate in politics.
No, I know, I get it,
That was
but
very
that's how bad it is.
But
Yeah.
this is way worse because I could never find myself that has no knowledge of the matter listening to someone that's actually seeing it
Yeah.
firsthand
It's crazy.
in person, and to have that bold statement like that.
But
that
he
is
also
crazy.
comes from Orange County.
Well,
No,
there
because
is.
it's serious and it's something that they don't really want to have to do.
So if
anything
you
about.
know how the Assembly Public Safety Committee, not to get too much in the politics of
Yeah.
this, the Senate or the Assembly Public Safety Committee, any bill that looks like it might result in incarceration is immediately rejected on its face. I told you I've been doing this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost track of how many times sometimes we go out, we save people from themselves. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yes,
Yeah.
me.
Me.
We save people from themselves. There's no pride in taking somebody's liberty away and putting them in jail.
No.
It's a necessity.
For
of
sure, or else I'm
trying
going to run
to
around like crazy
start
people.
life change. And I
Yes.
talked about the programs we have on our jail. We have tremendous programs and opportunities to get people into sobriety or mental health stability or whatever it might take. But that is just a wholesale discard for just good policy. I can't say it any other way. And so we have to start, I think, changing. That bill, by the way, finally did get through. We got it through the Assembly Public Safety Committee, was signed into law. But and by the way, the bill that we were introducing was to add fentanyl, trafficking of fentanyl by weight, the same way that methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine have enhancements by weight. They passed it, but the weight threshold is 1 kilo of fentanyl. That's where the enhancement comes in.
A kilo?
A kilo. A kilo.
That's not including the mix.
That's
Is that
If you-
could it be a kilo of pills, or does
That's
that have
what
to
I-
be
yeah, that's
a
what I was-
kilo
it's a
of?
kilo of pure
Pure
of
fentanyl.
It doesn't include the binding product.
And how much does 1
I
kilo?
think there might be
that would,
a number of pills also, but it was focused on volume. But
1 kilo of pure illicit fentanyl
Like
would
killing
kill
100,000 people?
the whole entire state of
well,
California.
that was the 39-pound seizure that we had, was like 40 million doses. A kilo would kill thousands easily. And just for context, and I'll use this for your viewers, if people don't know what a lethal dose of fentanyl is, a sugar packet, if you didn't know, a sugar packet's a gram. People don't realize that's 1 gram.
Yeah.
Dump those granules out. That's 500 lethal doses of
500, guys.
500.
Wow.
If you take 2 granules of that sugar and put it aside, that could be
Yeah, it's
a
insane.
lethal dose.
At
And that's
least.
not considering carfentanil, which is 100 times more potent than fentanyl, which is 50 times more potent than heroin, and it's off the chart. So we're seeing, not in large numbers, but we've seen the presence of carfentanil, and it's being billed as a naloxone or Narcan resistant fentanyl. It's not
Heard
that it's
about
resistant.
that. Heard about
It's
that.
just so toxic that there's not enough Narcan that you can introduce in your body to stop the effects of fentanyl.
So at
I'm going
that
to cover
point-
something real quick because
Yeah.
this is where I think people misunderstand what Narcan is and what it does. So as a drug expert back in a much younger version of me, drugs have what's called a half-life. You probably are aware of half-life of drugs.
Yes.
So heroin has a half-life, which that is for every period of time, it reduces in 50% of toxicity, and then the next period of time, it's down to that. The half-life for fentanyl is 15 minutes. It's a very rapid opioid, synthetic opioid. So if you use the measure of 1, let's just say 1 is the whole, and 15 minutes later, it's half. In 15 minutes after that, it's 1/4 the initial dose. And then at 45 minutes, it's 1/8 the initial dose. And at an hour, it's 1/16. So why Narcan is so important is you're literally racing against time to block the effects of the fentanyl and then hopefully get to that where that half-life is reduced and then breathing returns, because really it suppresses the breathing, which stops the body from working. It doesn't stop the heart. It's not like cocaine or meth that'll blow your heart up. It suppresses your system and suppresses your breathing till we stop breathing.
Terrible.
So you're literally racing to get, who's going to get to 15 minutes first? Is it going to be the fentanyl or is it going to be the Narcan or naloxone? Which is why it's so important to have that. I have it in my car. I travel with it in my car. And if I'm ever somewhere and see this, I know that I can go to my car, get the Narcan, and come back in and interdict the drug, right? Stop it, the impacts. I'm not an advocate for fentanyl test strips. And I've told people this, and I spoke to somebody in Congress that was trying to had a program to distribute fentanyl test strips. And I said, it's not going to do what you think. What will happen is it will not keep somebody from consuming fentanyl. Fentanyl test strips will be used to validate that that's what I bought, right? That I'll go in. And by the way, if you have, depending on the pill, you may scratch off a little bit of the pill that may or may not have the fentanyl in it, and you might get a false negative, right? And then consume something. Going back to the message here, if it's not from a pharmacist,
No bueno.
it's fentanyl.
Yeah, 100%.
It's 100% fentanyl. Do not consume anything that's not given to you by a pharmacist.
Well, the
Wait.
strips is just what you said earlier too. It's just a little band-aid of going back to the conversation you had about doing this one thing. There is no one thing. There has to be multiple things. So
Yeah.
the strips is just kind of acting like you're doing something when you're not.
That was something that was brought forth, and I won't say who, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to pick on the person either. I think it's somebody thought they had a good idea without a full understanding of what the issue is.
Yeah.
They saw one thing that could be done, and they thought they might make a difference,
Sure.
but it wouldn't move the needle in stopping the consumption of fentanyl, the illicit fentanyl market.
So that brings me to the whole point of how fentanyl is cutely packaged, right? And when I say that, just any pill form is cutely packaged, cute. When I was growing up, heroin, and heroin in California is black tar. It looks pretty scary. You've got to smoke it on foil, either that or heat it up in a spoon and put it in a syringe. That's scary. So as a first-time user who's going to try drugs, maybe just smoke a little pot or do a little ecstasy, or even like snorting cocaine,
Yeah.
right? Kids do that stuff in high
Yes.
school. But I wasn't going to do heroin because heroin, like,
Heroin was the back alley dirty drug.
exactly.
it was a dirty drug. Fentanyl is worse than heroin. It is a more lethal drug than heroin.
Yeah.
packaged in a
Put lipstick on it.
pretty
Oh.
package
Yeah.
with lipstick
Yeah.
and called something else. It's called Xanax. It's called ecstasy.
Yes.
It's called
Adderall.
Adderall. It's called all these things.
Well, two things. When you go over, I'm sorry, I
No.
interrupted you, but if you look at let's call it the history, what got us here. As a society, we're used to consuming pills,
Yeah.
right? We got a pill for everything.
Yeah.
Just watch
My head
watch
hurts.
commercials,
Take a pill.
right? You got a pill, and all this, and they list the side effects. The side effects. Once they go through the
Every
side effects,
single one of
I
them
never-
says
I never wanna take them.
sexual dysfunction.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Every single the last thing they say,
Guys,
like,
Quietly.
or
last
no,
thing
it's
is, or
sexual
death.
dysfunction or death.
Yeah, very
Death
quiet.
is always the last one.
Yeah.
The only thing that has ever come out that has had no side effects is, not to be political, but the
Viagra?
vaccine, which when it first initially came out, and that's where that's very interesting.
It didn't have any side
Tylenol.
effects,
No.
so it wasn't
Yeah.
going to cause death or
Nothing.
anything.
Nothing.
But
So-
Tylenol,
And
like,
you
have-
must take it. Never
Half-
mind. We don't
Well,
want you to go
Yeah, I
into
know,
that.
I didn't- yeah.
Not getting into the
Yeah, no.
COVID and this arena,
Right.
because that's a
But-
whole different show.
Yeah.
But if you look at marketing, that's not a vaccine. It's a flu shot.
Mm-hmm.
But they call it a vaccine because we get a polio vaccine. We get these vaccines
Yeah.
that prevent you from ever getting this ever again. But the COVID vaccine isn't a vaccine.
No.
It has a one period of time, and then you have to go back and get it
Totally.
again.
Just
You
like
could
the flu
still get
shot,
it,
yeah.
and
Like the
you
flu
could
shot.
still
I
get it.
I took the flu shot once, and I don't know if you guys take the flu shot, but I took it one time, and that one time I got the flu so
Fuck.
bad, so I was like, I'm never taking.
I've
the
never
freaking-
taken it, but a few doctors
I did it
have
one time.
told me to take it this year.
Yeah, because you're getting old. That's
Yeah.
why.
So if you go the issue with fentanyl and how that has kind of manifested over time. So you're right. The pills. I mean, they're not even trying to hide the pills anymore. Now they're marketing them. You know, multicolored pills,
Yeah.
rainbow pills. They have all these different things. We've seen the presence of xylazine in pills for now 6 years, where it's been increased. When we do the toxicology, we're getting fentanyl. What are the dose of fentanyl and xylazine presence is increased exponentially over the last 6 years. And for the viewers, if they don't know, xylazine makes it very resistant to Narcan. And so the odds of getting somebody back, it's supposed to get a better high, also makes you more likely to not be able to be brought back from the effects of. Now, here's the thing that if you look at addiction, right, we're talking about addiction here, people over time may be introduced to a Xanax that's not a Xanax, that's fentanyl, and then they're forming this addiction, this addictive pattern. And over time, they start to seek out fentanyl for their addiction, the crisis that they place themselves in.
Yeah.
Which brings back to the best way to not get there is don't take these pills in the first place.
Right.
But as the county coroner, we have data. It's a data-rich environment.
Yeah.
Orange County, 3.2 million residents, right? We have these death investigations that we do. Going back and looking for patterns, right? Looking to see what we learn about addiction and how fentanyl is impacting the community. In over 96% of our fentanyl death investigations, the individual was a known addict or had a history of narcotics arrests over time. That's 24 to 25 people. So there are the issues or the circumstances where somebody might take a pill for the first time, but that's highly more unlikely than somebody starting to seek out fentanyl to curb and satisfy their addictive pattern, which is why we have to intervene way earlier with programs to get people in sobriety. Education's key. We have a great program that we wrote for 5th and 6th grade students called Above the Influence. It's not a scared straight program. We know those don't work. We think they do, but they don't. They oftentimes teach kids how to use drugs because we may
Sure.
take a kid who's never even had a conversation about it and introduce them into a world where narcotics is shown to them. And I'm not saying that is the gateway, but that's
Could
not
be.
the right way, but it could be. But we change our program entirely away from scared straight type of education to life choices. And it's all about this is what narcotics will do to you. We have a foam brain. They talk about, the adult or adolescent developing brain and dopamine and how it gets, homeostasis and all these different things. And it's a six-week class, an hour a day for 6 weeks. And every class ends with, and what we learn, just don't start using drugs in the first place, right? Because if you ask any addict, if you could do one thing over again, what would you do differently? I never would use the first place. right? I would have made a different choice at that party when somebody handed me that or whatever it may be. And if we can get half our kids to make that better life choice, we're starting down the path of curbing our addiction crisis in this country.
So my point where I was heading was, it's so much more enticing, I guess, to take a fentanyl pill over black tar heroin, and so, which has really perpetuated this insane epidemic. It's an epidemic.
Yes.
90% of the clients that come through my facilities now are addicted to fentanyl. The other 10% are alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people, out of those 90%, there's 20% that didn't even know they were using fentanyl. They thought they were using methamphetamines, cocaine, different drugs. And they were in for a very rude awakening when they started their when they got here and started their detox process, because it's a much different detox to detox off of methamphetamines than it is to detox off of fentanyl.
Well, if you go back over the history where we were with opioids, and if you go back to the pill mills back from 15 years ago, yeah, you could I can go to you doctor, get 30 pills, and just have this access.
Mm-hmm.
And our solution was lockdown access. Well, that doesn't do anything for the addiction.
Right.
Yeah.
It just means, so we go back to back alley dirty tar heroin.
Yeah.
Heroin became the affordable alternative
Yes.
to OxyContin and all these opioids. Because you can't just say, we're not going to give it to you, you got to stop cold turkey and rub dirt in it and get over it. That's not how addiction works. You're going to find some way to cope. And there are probably people that can, maybe through will, say, I'm stopping cold turkey.
Sure.
I'm going to battle this. I think they're not the norm.
No.
Not many on
Not
the
many.
on the
Few and far
opioid.
between.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Few and
so-
far
But I
between.
believe there are some, because there's always, some outliers.
There always will be, but it's usually some significant emotional experience. My partner died in my arms. We were using heroin, and this person overdosed, and I lost them, and we have a kid, and for this reason, I have to become whole again and get back to normal. But if you look at the progression of opioids, we had the pill mills, we locked them down. We have this affordable alternative heroin, and then we have the progression that now is fentanyl. You can't buy. I'm sure we're not even seeing heroin even smuggled over anymore.
That was the other question I was going to ask you that tied into the whole thing is you told us about all of the pounds of fentanyl that you guys have. What's the word? Confiscated?
Interdicted.
Interdicted.
Yes.
What is the heroin?
Heroin's almost down to zero. Methamphetamine is still by volume. It's still the highest trafficked.
Yeah.
We don't see marijuana anymore because hard to believe this. The cartels are just growing it here domestically.
Right.
A lot of the grows in Central California are cartel controlled, so they don't have to smuggle it anymore. They just grow it here.
That's unbelievable.
And then sell
I
it
think
at the stores.
Talk about naivete. Here's naivete. Let's decriminalize marijuana and legitimize it. You think the cartels are going to walk away from a multi-billion-dollar business?
No.
No, they're just going to find new ways to capitalize on it. So
Blackmail and coming here, taking farmers' houses over. And
I had a friend of
God knows.
mine, a friend of a friend, I should say. I met with him back probably in 16, 17. He goes, "Hey, I'm gonna open up a marijuana. I'm gonna have a grow. I'm gonna legitimize it. I'm gonna distribute, and I'm gonna have the lab that can test it and do all the things they're supposed to do." And I go, "Do you have kids?" And he goes, "Yeah, I have 2 daughters." I go, "You would put them at risk?" He goes, "Well, I'm not gonna."
be 6 months, they're knocking at the door.
I said, "The cartels are not gonna let you just walk into their industry." And about 3 years later, he called me. He goes, "I'm getting death threats."
Wow.
I go, "Yeah. What do you think was going to happen? You think you just wander in as some legitimate business guy? There's not. They try to say it's legitimized through these processes, but the vast majority of everything that was supposed to happen never happened in California on the marijuana front. The taxes didn't come because these people aren't paying them. They're still going to operate in the shadows in this cottage industry. We've just legitimized the arena in which they can operate.
Yeah.
I'm not picking on,
Yeah.
this is the state. The state's made these decisions. I got to color between the lines.
Just another mess to try to clean up.
But
It's really
But
quite something
it
else.
it is crazy. I mean, fentanyl is out of control. So my most recent girls that I sponsor, I knew fentanyl was out of control, but to the younger generation, it's something I've never seen before. So she's only 28 years old. Her drug of choice was fentanyl. And she has lost 8 of her friends in the last year. To me, that's insane. As a 28-year-old, to lose 8 close friends because of this one drug, it just was mind-blowing to me, considering I got sober at 23, and I haven't seen something like that in such a short amount of time. But then kind of going back on what you said about, it's starting with the opioids. And I mean, if we really go all the way back, I mean, that epidemic started by a bunch of lies, feeding people thinking that these are going to help you through cancer. I mean, there's now movies on Netflix about it. And that's also like, where do we start?
Oxys.
Like, what do we do? Because I mean, we still sell alcohol and make it look like it's a glamorous life, when sure, some people can have a glass of wine and call it a day, but alcohol is killing a ton of people. And people, yes, addiction is alive and well, but then you have people that are getting in domestic violence cases because of alcohol. Sure. And that's something that is continuously in our TV, our film, like, oh my God, you're so beautiful, it's amazing, this is sexy, but then it's destroying people's lives, and that's something that is legal. So it's like, what do we do? How do we, because like you said, there isn't just a one answer. Yes, we have this podcast and we want to be a voice because knowledge is power. And it's, if I was younger and I got to see somebody like ourselves, we're all the same but different, and being sober is cool. Being an individual is cool. Being able to be in control of your emotions, your actions, how you carry yourself, and to do what you want to do as an individual for your morals and this, that, and the other, that's cool. Following something that you just are, trying to just kind of fit in because that's what humans like to do. I think that's important, but that's only so much. So it's like, there's so many things, because you can't just put one Band-Aid on, So like, what do we do? How do we make some massive change?
I think you brought up a lot of really good points, and I don't know, my kids are grown. Mm-hmm. I have grandkids coming soon, and you want to always be a positive role model. I think the first thing we need to overcome in your perfect world that you described is the family unit is broken. Sure. Yeah. We talked about, our kids are being educated by YouTube and whatever app is they're looking at, and you can sit at a dinner table and probably parents are looking at their phone at the same time too. And they're not communicating with each other. So how do you go back to, focus on the family in a way that instills good values and reinforces positive decisions? These kids that I spoke to last week, 4 of them, they're all teens. And I said, the courage it takes to share your story, right? When it's not going to be popular with your peers, to be that adult. They're the adult in the room right now, the way they spoke. And it was uplifting to hear them talk. If there's one thing I would, not one thing, but what I'd like to get out, and maybe this will wake some of our parents up. In Orange County, as a county coroner, for the first time in our county's history, fentanyl is the #1 cause of death for those 17 and under, for teens. Wow. Fentanyl is now the #1 cause of death. It's not auto collisions. It's not suicide. It's not accidental deaths. It's fentanyl. Well, fentanyl is considered an accidental death by classification.
This is Orange County.
In Orange County.
17 and under.
This is Orange County. So
17 and under. That's
17
crazy.
and under. Yeah. CDC has what, 18 to 40?
45, I think.
Well, I'm not saying that it's the #1 cause of death amongst everybody. For that age group, fentanyl is the #1 cause of death. Wow. If you're 17 and under, that is the #1 cause of death in teens is fentanyl. It's not auto collisions or other things.
Wow.
So it's here. We need to recognize it and then actively get in and stop it in whatever way we can. And that includes difficult, tough conversations with your kids. Yeah. We would never, how many times you hear, don't touch the stove, it's hot.
Yeah.
Right? You tell your kids things to keep them safe from making bad choices. how many parents have actively sat down with their kids and said, I need to talk to you about this thing that's happening right now about these pills that are out on the market.
I do.
I know you do,
Yeah, we're in
and
this
I do.
industry here, though.
And
But
the vast
my kids
majority
have
aren't
we're
even
grown.
home.
We're the outlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not happening at every dinner table.
For sure. Especially now, you know, like you brought up, Shane, the divorce rate is significantly increased.
Yeah.
So you have now, you know, parents that aren't together anymore. So that's usually two places a child is living. So the communication is just not happening.
You know, when you look at all those things, right? Broken families, conversations not happening. One of the questions I asked the kids, these are 4 kids.
Yeah.
They've lived a nightmare through the loss of a mother, and the other 3 a sibling. And I asked a simple question: knowing what you know, how hard would it be for you to go get a pill? They go, you could go do it right now. It's easy. And it's not like, you know, you had to know a friend that connected with that guy that's got that, you know.
Yeah.
It was hard, man. I used to have to
Yeah,
jump
it was a
on my
pain.
Elite
Bro,
80 scooter,
I would have-
know.
illegally drive that thing down the
Yes.
street
I'll
with
tell
no
you, if
helmet
I saw
on.
you on
Sit
that
at the
thing,
gas
you were
station
a
for
car
2 to
stop
3
waiting to
hours.
happen.
Holy
Yeah.
shit.
And there wasn't a lot of cops where I grew up. I grew up in this little town called Grand Terrace in San Bernardino County, and there was one cop that patrolled the whole little area, and me and my buddies my good friend, he had a red Elite 80 scooter. We both had red ones.
Yeah.
And I was John and he was Ponch because he was Hispanic, and we used to drive around and just be like
gosh.
dun, 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 dun. All the while smoking pot, pretending like we were the California Highway Patrol.
That's funny.
We were nerds, man, but you know, it wasn't as scary, and I don't like saying, I truly don't like mean these kind of statements. I would rather there not be any fentanyl or heroin, but could we just put heroin back on the street and get rid of the fentanyl? Because people weren't dying.
Well, they were, but not like
Like this.
The problem is, though, nobody wants heroin anymore.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody wants heroin. They want fentanyl.
Yeah.
They're seeking it. If you look at the dark web, it used to be that, you know, you could, I'm buying a Xanax,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm buying a Percocet. Now it's advertised
Fentanyl.
Percocet with fentanyl, Xanax with fentanyl. They're saying it's got fentanyl
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they can't sell it if it doesn't have fentanyl
They-
in it anymore.
Yeah.
They used to on Craigslist. I know I'm gonna like date myself, but like and I never even did this, but I heard about people on Craigslist selling heroin, and they would sell it as black tar roofing on Craigslist,
It's innovative marketing.
Yeah.
right?
But at least you knew you're buying.
Totally.
You knew you were getting black tar heroin. It was probably not even the problem. And the other part with heroin is it was actually done the opposite. So it would come across, you know, a decent heroin, and by the time it got to the
gets stepped
streets,
on.
it got stepped on so much it wasn't as powerful.
Well, the same thing is happening. Well, the pills are coming through produced. So I've not heard of any production north of the border. Now they have pure fentanyl is being brought across. So that's got to be stepped on in some way, and hopefully done in a way that makes it reduced to I hate to sound like I'm marketing of it, but a consumable level that's not lethal.
Right.
Because we already talked about how
Yeah.
they're not really good at blending
Right.
narcotics, but we know that they're bringing across, pure fentanyl. I have 6 different narcotics programs that we run in the sheriff's department, and one is a highway interdiction team or Viper team. It's, if you ever go down to San Diego on the 5, you'll see the sheriff's department right around the checkpoint, and they're looking for cars that have, you know, things they're looking for that are marketing, bring it up. Narcotics coming north, guns and money going south. The guns that are making it into Mexico. Mexico, you can't buy a gun in Mexico. Every gun in Mexico is smuggled into Mexico from the United States. That makes its way back to the cartels or in these wars. So, you know, in a way, both countries kind of creating another problem for the other.
Right.
Because the violence is happening there. We've got some responsibility in our addiction and, you know, crisis we have here. The fentanyl crisis, they obviously have some responsibility for intervening and helping stop the flow of narcotics. north of the border, and I think we should be doing that a lot better. I'm not sure that I think it's we're trying to make it work better, but I don't think we're getting
by having
outcomes.
you and you being in for so long, so it's like I feel like you're a rarity in the sense of, does that mean that the half of the I guess everything is corrupt, so it's like, are they getting let in? You know,
bad things
it
are
makes
happening. People are getting paid.
Yeah,
Well,
100%.
It's a
and it's all
perfect
money.
storm.
100%
So if you go through what's brought us here today, we have a fentanyl crisis, we have the border crisis,
Yep.
we have issues with a reputational control, I guess, or our reputation in the policing profession that we're under attack. We can't recruit people into this profession; it's very difficult.
Yeah.
If you look at Prop 47, one of the unintended consequences of Prop 47 is a lot of municipal agencies just bench their teams. They don't have narcotics teams anymore because why? It's like making a legal left turn, right? You write them a ticket. So are we going to if I'm deficient personnel, if I have vacancies, am I going to put them in a narcotics program that really has no impact anymore? Right. Or do I fill other critical areas that we can make a difference? And all these things have added to the success of the cartels.
Yeah, and I don't like it, man. I I grew up in an era where if you were doing drugs, selling drugs, committing crimes, I've never considered myself a criminal because the only time I ever committed a crime was because I needed drugs,
Still criminal acts.
Yes, it is. But my point is if I were a criminal and I got clean, I would still be committing crime. You knew back then that, this ties into the cops. Not, your guys' hands seem to be tied a bit. You knew what you were getting into.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like, I don't like this crying because I'm a criminal that the police beat me up or did something, because if I ever got beat up by the cops,
you deserve.
I deserve it.
Yes,
it's
the new generation, bro.
Yeah, it's just
it's
because
the new
it
fucking
goes along with
generation.
what he's saying about parents. And
It's like parents,
yeah,
you can't spank your kids
participation
anymore. They're gonna call the
trophies.
cops.
Probably
on you.
because I started the crap, right?
No,
Yes,
well,
you're doing bad things. Bad behavior deserves punishment. If we don't, my husband likes to say we're something about. What do you say? Chimpanzees. So if we didn't have rule and order, if we didn't have jails, if we didn't have policemen, we would all be running around chaos.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what is sadly
happening.
happening.
It's sad.
And what I think is, not to be a conspiracy theorist here, but the narrative, the media didn't do a very good job in the sense of, at one time, I remember growing up and you ask kids in, second grade, what do you want to be when you grow up? Fireman, policeman, professional athlete, just a doctor, a lawyer, all of these things, and you know what the number one
rapper,
YouTuber,
oh,
An influencer.
An influencer, yeah.
So I want to give you just a topic that's, because you mentioned the application of force is what we'll call it. I was talking. So we've had a couple of bad years. I mean, post George Floyd, it's been difficult.
Yeah.
I was talking to all the police reform that was coming out of Congress a few years ago in the White House, and I was talking to two members of Congress, and they were talking about police use of force and how they were going to resolve this issue through accountability measures and all these other things. And after they were through explaining what they were going to do, and I said, well, I can reduce use of force by 50% right now in my department. That's a staggering number to say. I can a 50% reduction in use of force right now. And I said, get me out of social work. Half of the applications of force we have are somebody in a mental health crisis or under the influence of a narcotic that we have to intervene, right? So if we can off-ramp these people, get them into either mental health stability or programs before they decline into a law enforcement contact. And by the way, the first person somebody sees when they're in crisis should not be somebody wearing a gun, a badge, and a uniform. Yeah, totally. It should be somebody that is trained. We're trained. I train every deputy who works for me is trained in crisis intervention techniques. And I have a behavioral health bureau that works in the community to deal with people who are in addiction and homeless and mental ill. And they get 3 times the training in de-escalation and intervention through crisis. But there's people that can do it a lot better than we do, and it should be those people who are coming in contact with these oftentimes in the home, right? Stabilize them in community first. Let's not use the jail as the default place
Right.
to take somebody. Stabilize them in community, get them connected to services. We talked about investing, right? Investing these programs.
Yep.
So we're putting money where it matters. We will save money long term
Yes,
if
you will.
we intervene
Yes.
and invest early on to get people back into sobriety before they decline deep into addiction, before they lose their job. You mentioned one thing, and I'm not going to say that your mindset was. You said, when you commit those crimes, it was a crime against yourself, but that's not true. Your family suffered.
Oh yeah.
For
There's
sure.
there's a lot of collateral damage
yeah.
that goes through addiction and criminality. When we talk about incarcerating people, there are families at home that aren't going to be housed at the end of this when somebody goes into jail or prison, because there's no way, especially with house prices in California,
Oh, yeah.
there's no way for them to make those ends meet
Yeah.
and keep them in the home that they were in, or they have to work 3 jobs. What happens with those kids when mom's working
Right.
3 jobs to be able to afford? They're raising themselves, and what do they have access to? Who's really raising them?
The streets and the
There's a
praising
lot of
with
just
social media.
They're
and-
looking to make money and they're selling drugs.
it's a snowballing effect that when these life choices just they perpetuate,
Yeah.
and they just get worse over time. So the least intrusive measure or method to intervene and get people back on their feet is the one we should be taking. It's the one that has to be taken early on, and we have to invest in those programs to do that. Else we're going to be dealing with the aftermath of these things when they get much, much worse and much more expensive to resolve.
Yeah. I'm gonna I have 2 things and then I'm gonna go ahead and end my portion of it. But one, I will say, if we do have these community places, resources for them to go, hopefully you can get them before they become addicted, like I was addicted, because the only place, and I'm so grateful, and I say this all the time, is that, God showed up with his angels wearing a green uniform in the form of the Orange County Sheriff's Department to rescue me. And they took me to the only detox center that has ever truly worked for me, because my last detox center was 550 North Flower Street in Santa Ana, and I haven't used since. Prior to that, that whole year before, I had gone to probably 7 different detox centers. I left against medical and clinical advice every time.
Well, you didn't have the option with the last one.
Yeah, you wouldn't allow me to. So some of these places, though, you need to be able to get locked down, because if I could leave, I left. And when I couldn't leave, it was a nice 2-man cell. I had my own toilet. A toilet I shared with the guy. You guys brought me the food through the window. It was nice.
I'm hoping to get a really good Yelp rating from you.
Yeah.
I just gave you one.
I'll give you one. I'm like, my Yelp experience would not be like this one's over here. You're painting it as it was this lovely experience.
I mean,
Me on the
here's
other
the
hand,
thing.
I'm like, get me out of here.
Here's the
This is
thing.
not
It was all steel and concrete.
Yeah,
and
cold,
It was cold.
not
and,
where,
and when you
terrible.
first get there, the inmates, they don't give you the best jumpsuit. They give you either one that's too big if you're short, or if you're a really tall guy, they give you the short one.
Sandals don't fit.
Yeah, you would be on yours would
It
come
would
up
be
to
like
your
that.
knees.
Yeah,
Yep.
Three-quarter
You gotta
inch.
earn
You gotta
that.
earn the clothes.
Yeah.
What's the old, is it culottes?
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, cool lot. Wow, that's bringing it back.
It's way back.
Yeah.
It's old school.
I like
First
that.
time I went to Orange County Jail, you guys used to have those orange ones that you zipped up
Yeah.
in the
Now they're
front.
now they're two
Now they're
piece.
2 pieces.
You know
yeah.
why? Because when you get a rip on one of those 1 pieces, you had to throw the whole thing.
The
out.
whole thing out. Ah,
It's actually cost saving. So we just have to replace half.
and so there was that, and then
Plus they're easier to get them to fit when you have.
For sure.
I also wanted to make a amends to the Orange County Sheriff's Department, since I have the sheriff of Orange County here. I'm sorry to put some of your deputies through hell for a short period of years, but about 4 or 5.
Yeah, it's. I will tell you that You know what is probably the most fulfilling part of this profession? This has happened to me several times. Is running into people. Some I've arrested. I'll tell you the story this way, and I share this with the newest graduates from our academy. I tell life stories, and I had arrested a young man for methamphetamine when you could go to jail for methamphetamine and stolen property. I still remember his name to this day, but I won't share it. And I took him to jail, and I was unless you were being intentionally difficult, I would open that plexiglass window and I would have a conversation about life choices, about where you are. And it was about half an hour from, I patrolled in Lake Forest, took about half an hour to get from there to 550 North Flower in Santa Ana. And I would just talk to them and just be a person, just be somebody that might, that you would want to have.
Hit a nerve.
Yeah. And so I booked this person in. I wish you the best of luck. I was never malicious. And I left. And about a few years later, I promoted to sergeant. And I went to a different jail, the Lacey Jail in Orange. 3,111 inmates is one of the largest jails in the nation. And I went to that jail, and there was an employee there, a civilian employee, whom I knew. And I started catching up with her because she worked in a different jail that I knew. And she mentioned this young man's name. She goes, "Do you remember?" And I said, "Yes, I remember him. I arrested him for possession of methamphetamine and possession of stolen property." She said, "Yes, he's my nephew." Wow. And I said, I'm so sorry. And she said, "No." Her words, not mine. "No, he credits you for saving his life."
Wow.
The conversation you had with him for over that day, the stars were aligned, and he was an addict, and he got in, he got clean, he got released, he went back to school, he's engaged to be married, has a job, all these great, just phenomenal changes in his life. And she said, "He credits you for that." And I told that story not to say like, I'm a superhero or I get credit for that. I told the story to our newest deputies because I told them, if I asked every one of you why you got into this profession, you'd say to make a difference, to serve my community, whatever that might be. And so, I'm finishing my 35th year. My 36th will start in a month. Wow. And I tell them, I go, that you have the same opportunities. The worst thing you can do is serve in this profession and get the end of a career and look back over at opportunities missed, right? Opportunities missed to intervene and lift somebody up and put them back on their feet. So I will tell them, I go, I don't know how many you got, but I got one, and I got one save. I have others too that people shared stories about calls for service I've been on. They say, you may not remember this, but you were at my house. And it's a difficult profession. You have a difficult profession. Yeah. You, like me, you deal with people when they are in personal crisis. Yeah. We get invited into their lives in ways where we can either just say, "I'm here to give you a solid 8 and get a paycheck," or you can realize that this is a big human race. We're all part of it. We're all running it. And we can either do it to make a difference, or we can, ignore reality. And that does not work with me. This is the unfortunate cards we're being dealt right now. I believe we will get over it. We better, because we're turning into 16th century China with opium right now. And it's getting really, really bad. And we have to get a grasp on it. We can't ignore it. It is the elephant in the room, and nobody's taking it head on. Everybody is talking around it without making any positive change to solve the problem. Little bits, little tiny bites.
The ones that can are making too much money off of not doing anything because, like you said, a Band-Aid is something where that's, if anything, is kind of talking around the topic where real big change has to happen. And there's so many things. Obviously, like you said, I think for our cops, it's like we should actually probably pour more money. And I've lived in Orange County for 20 years. We've been pouring money into the 5 freeway, and there's still a section that I used to pass with going to college. Still not done. I don't get that. Obviously, my tax dollar money for California, where is it going? Because the 405 is the shits.
Ask Gavin.
But to me, it's like I want my police force. I want my money to go into you guys so that you guys are basically the baddest dudes out there in the training, all of it, so that you can be the best you possibly can be, because we're providing that for you, and your pay should be something where everybody wants to sign up and do it because you're having a significant life as well. But that's just one thing.
I will tell you that first of all, I'm blessed to have a great team I get to come to work with every day. They make my life special because I get to work with phenomenal people. They have the right mindset. Pay is not ever the number one reason somebody comes to work. They want to work in an environment where they can be successful, and we try to create that environment for them where they can intervene. We do a lot of training. A lot of the training models for deployment were, many of them, created in the Orange County Sheriff's Department. We've had 2 incidents of mass shootings. I'll call it mass murder because that's the intent. It's not mass shooting. It's intent to kill
My
many
doctor
people.
died.
Yes, Dr. Cheng.
Yep, he was my doctor.
He saved lives that day.
Yeah, he did.
Undoubtedly saved lives. But in both those incidents, there's a reason we were successful because we've invested in that training, the tools to do the job, the training to do it well, trusting them to do what they know to do. And in both those circumstances, they exceeded my expectations. And I couldn't be prouder of the department.
That's because you're a rarity in the sense of you're a fantastic leader. I wasn't saying it in the sense of Orange County. It's like we need yourself leading the way that you lead your team because they obviously, yes, to serve. But when you have a great leader, you are able to do things in a amazing environment. And you can say the opposite in others. So it's just like basically taking you and your squad and implementing it everywhere.
Well, we share everything I talked to you about. We have, when I talked about the drug education program we created, it's science-based. I presented that to FBI, ONDCP, DHS. I said, we have the curriculum. We know it's working. We're meeting these kids. Now, we haven't had the population to test, but we're in 37 schools teaching this class to them. And I think it should be the national model. The DARE programs, nobody has them anymore.
No.
They don't have the people. They don't have the people around. But to just maybe affirm your comment, I'm full.
Yeah.
I have about 4,100 people who work for the Orange County Sheriff's Department, sworn and professional staff. We're hiring right now, by the way, ocsheriff.gov if you want to learn more about
Is there an age restriction?
No, come on over.
Right.
Well, you have to be you don't have to be a resident anymore.
I'm an American citizen.
American
now.
citizen.
Oh
but
yeah.
You don't have to be an American citizen anymore.
Oh really?
The laws change in
He
Colorado.
is American citizen, though.
American,
He called me up and he said, "Hey,
See,
can
but
I phone a friend because I
isn't-
need to know the first 3 words
But
of
isn't
the
that the
U.S.
problem, too?
Constitution."
Like everything I
people.
feel like is just so messy. Like we're messy everywhere, from the way that we're allowing drugs coming in, illegal drugs coming in, to the way that we're just now you don't even have to be an American citizen to serve your country. It just is so it's just a lot.
Listen,
to
it
work
starts
on.
with the family and ends
So
with the
where
family,
do
in my
we-
opinion.
yeah, where do we start?
It's mental health. It starts there with the family. It's broken relationships. You have one
But
parent.
how do we implement that? Because I feel we hear this, you know.
You got to
the
bring it
sense-
back to where it was. There's no God in school. There's no American
Yeah.
flag in school anymore. There's no singing the songs.
Patriotism.
There's no
Yeah.
in
Come
the
to Texas,
schools.
baby.
It's
There.
just a fucking pairing.
Sad.
Well, I think that I'll start with it's got to be the United State of family.
Yes.
You have to get your family has to be well situated, and I think that's the best place to start. The other issues will take care of themselves over time. If
100%.
you get back to just making sure families are engaged
Yes.
Yeah.
and solving these problems.
Yes.
These are solvable problems. They really are. It's going to take a heavy lift to get us back on the right course. But there's a reason why we are a great country. It's because we're tenacious
Yeah.
to overcome problems.
Yeah.
But we have to recognize this as the problem that it is. There's just a little bit of denial, maybe
Sure.
a lot of bit of denial that we are in a crisis state. And until we get beyond that and recognize it, I'll go one step further. We talked a little bit about addictions, a little bit about mental health. We have to get over the stigma of mental health.
Please.
And just say this is a friend of mine calls it mental health is the not casserole disease. You get cancer, people bring you a casserole. You break your leg, people bring you a casserole. You're mentally ill, everybody just denies.
Right.
There's denial that goes
They
with
start to go. They start to
Yeah.
go away from you.
it. Yeah, they don't want anything. They don't want to acknowledge it. It's just this. It's like it's its own type of cancer that is contagious.
And
they-
honestly, man, people with mental health and addiction problems, the one thing that they need more than anything else is love.
Yeah.
They need understanding. They need to have an environment where they can lean on a shoulder, and they need to be saturated with people who care about them. And mental health is an ugly, ugly illness. It's difficult, and a lot of the families who struggle with it, they turn to the legal system. We have these people who are in crisis, mental health crisis, and their families have restraining orders against them because there's nowhere for them to go to get stable. And so we have the Be Well Center, you probably are aware, in Orange County. We have the second Be Well Center coming online in the city of Irvine. It'll be much larger and more robust. It'll have a re-entry component to it, but I love it because it's right down the street from the James Music Facility, where we have our re-entry facility from the jail, and then we have this resources just down the street for them to go to get post-care treatment.
Nice.
And we have a third Be Well campus will be coming online in probably the beach community of northern Orange County at some point.
That's nice.
But it was only about a decade ago that in the county of Orange, 3.2 million residents, we had 10 crisis stabilization beds for adults. 10 beds for 3.2 million people. That's why the hospitals got so overrun with mental health crisis, because there's nowhere to take them. We took them to the ER, which is built for physical hurts, not for hurts of the head, right? And they couldn't deal with them. And they're on board because they started getting impacted from the volume of people who are in crisis being brought to them. So they're investing in these Be Well campuses. Be Well is a huge resource for those who are in addiction, under the influence. Rather than take them to the jail, take them to somewhere that will get them into sobriety, right? Start that first step of getting them out of their addiction.
And I think that one is it's such, nobody likes that topic because there are it's a variety of flavors in there. You're gonna have I know they took it out of hospitals because you used to be able to take somebody that's not doing well and 5150 them. Now that you can't do that anymore. But then you also have people that are
well, you can, but it's really hard to get somebody 5150.
Yeah, it's super
it's
difficult.
Impossible almost.
Well, it's not impossible to have a 5150 hold placed on somebody. What's difficult is having that managed over a period of time because of the limitation space. You really can't deny a 5150 hold, but you can say that they will mitigate it beyond the 72 hour, within the 72 hours, and then release them because the doctors can release them off of that.
And the only last thing I'm going to touch on the mental health is then you have the other side of the coin of people using life as a mental health issue in the sense of not taking accountability for their bad behavior and choices and just saying that they have, they're suffering from mental health, which is just like daily life. Life is hard. Being an adult is hard, and having responsibilities is hard. And also I'm an addict, so I have to diligently be willing to work my program to stay sober and actively do that, or else it can all of a sudden vanish and I could go back to my character defects immediately. So it's also, not individuals also need to take accountability for a lot of situations that are going on as well, including your household and things of that nature, where the naive thing comes. It's you have people that are really, really sick that don't have anywhere to go, and then you also have other people using it as a crutch because we're allowing this kind of soft environment to be okay and giving a lot of people attention that aren't necessarily needing it more
or
so
deserving of it.
what I'm saying?
I understand.
Because I'm seeing a lot of that too.
Yes.
Where
people are getting away with
and
murder
it's not really
and they're taking
fair
advantage.
to the ones that are really ill.
100%.
The ones that have their families have the restraining orders. Where because you are have a little bit of anxiety going into a new room full of people. Yeah, me too. It's called being normal and you're nervous and that's totally okay. That's very different.
I totally agree with you, but just to add to your analogy, we're in a world today where nobody's accountable for their problems.
Yeah.
And so it's always somebody else caused it.
For sure.
And if you look at addiction, I'll talk about alcoholism. A lot of alcoholics I've dealt with that are very severe in their alcoholism. They'll tell you they drink because they have problems.
For sure.
But they don't realize they have problems because they drink. They can't associate.
And they're making those ones 10 times worse because they're adding on more problems to their already existing problems.
Exactly.
It's just a self-fulfilling prophecy that, well, I have to drink. Because
and you get stuck. But you get stuck. It's a vicious cycle that you get stuck in. I was stuck in that cycle, and then I got out, and like she just said a few minutes ago, I stopped doing the things that I needed to do on a daily basis, and then I went back out. That's when I caused you guys a little bit of
Amends.
They're still talking about it, by the
Yeah.
way.
yeah. They are.
Well, you said-
See, I knew they were.
You,
Fucking A.
when you said character defects, right? And I think the first step is for everybody to realize we've all have character defects. There isn't anybody that is without challenges in life. It's the coping mechanisms you put in place
Yes.
Yeah.
to deal with them.
Yep.
And but coping is one thing, but coping we're nowhere to go to cope.
Right.
That's that's the more
that's the
challenging
tough part. And I do see that it does, the mental health and the addiction gets put on law enforcement, primarily because, you know, when we're acting out in a crisis, it requires an immediate crisis intervention. You guys are the best and the quickest and the swiftest.
well because we have lights and sirens.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and guns and cuffs.
Can I tell you something that is interesting? So when I started in this profession in the late '80s, the fun jobs were, you know, the gang enforcement, the narcotics, and all these,
Yeah.
you know, really cool.
Yeah.
You know what the job that everybody has the longest list of people who want to be part of? My Behavioral Health Bureau.
Really?
The guys that go out and do the lift people back up and put them back on their feet. That's
awesome.
it says a lot about the character of people who we're hiring into this profession, which I'll go back to. We're hiring, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you what else. This is maybe a little surprising for people. People think we want, you know, the 6'4", 220 guy linebacker, and that's not who we hire. We hire people from a wide variety of life experiences, and we're not looking for perfect people. I'm looking for somebody that I can train to do the job. I want to hire people of character. If you have the right character to come into this profession, right, I'll take you. And I don't care if you're 5'2" or whatever. I can train you to do this job, but I need the right character, of the right person to come in and be willing to make a contribution for the betterment of our society to come in and do this job. And if you know somebody that fills that bill, look us up.
We have a 5'2" lady here in San Juan, works for your department.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We had a graduation a few years ago, and I'm 6'5", so I give the badges to the recruits, and this young lady comes across. I swear to God, if she came up to my midsection, and it was so obvious the disparity between our height, and I heard people snickering in the audience. I was so angry about that, and later I talked to somebody, and they said, yeah, that one girl, she was so short, and I go, hey, I'm more afraid of her than I am of you. You want to know why? She did every single thing everybody else did. Every guy that went over a 6-foot wall, she went over the wall too. She could not have made it through this academy unless she did every single thing that everybody else did. I'm more afraid of her than I am of you guys. And it's just, you know, there's a reason why we have short people, tall people. I want a good representation of the community to be the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and we need to have the right people apply.
Awesome. Man, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
This
so much
is
for doing what you're doing, because you know,
Caring,
it's
caring.
very nice for us to go to a town hall and see someone in law enforcement with where you're at and speaking with such like you really
Love and compassion.
care, and you've been doing it, you've been like saying it
35
since-
years.
well,
Yeah, I
even
started
with
when I was
just the
10.
fentanyl. Even with fentanyl since 2014, you know, I mean, as an individual, that just must be frustrating when it's like, yeah, I've been talking about this for years and no one has been listening, and now we're currently in this position, and it's just like magnified times a million. But it's very cool to see, and it also, you know, gave me a little glimmer of hope, because sometimes there are so many situations, and it does seem like there's a lot going on that are like, what fire do you put out first type deal. And that's kind of one of those things where, you know, speaking up about it, us doing this, going to town halls, seeing you speak, like going into the community, spreading as the message as much as we possibly can, just because, you know, knowledge is truly each individual. I mean, if you didn't talk to that one guy that you ended up picking up that night, maybe he wouldn't be where he's at today, because maybe clearly you sparked something in him, and that's the point.
I think there's just times when we have opportunities that I use the analogy, the stars lined up that day. Whatever reason, that was the right moment.
Yeah.
I could have said nothing, and maybe nothing would have happened. I'm a firm believer that there's intervention that takes place that puts people back in a really a better place.
Yeah.
I was at a conference. We talk about influence. I'm fortunate because I get to influence on a national stage on some of the appointments that I have with FBI and DHS, and I get to DC. I get to talk to people, and I was talking to a group, and I said something, a spontaneous comment that became a quote that's associated with me. And I said, nobody goes to a football game to watch their team play defense. I hate playing defense. You got to be on the offense. You got to be pushing all the time. Well, else we wait for things like this to manifest and happen, and then you have to try to undo all of this to make it better. I'd much rather be on the front end, creating programs and intervening, and before it declines to these really, really bad, impactful outcomes upon people, family, the community. It's not just fentanyl. That's one. The addiction is one outcome of a bad thing.
Totally.
But then you have families lost. You have loved ones lost. You have homeless issues that manifest because of fentanyl. The impact on the economy through costs of all these things that we go. There's a report that's put out. It's called the cost of crime, and it monetizes each crime that occurs and what that costs society to deal with. Like a homicide is like $2 million. This is years ago, by the way. It would be like $2 million of economic impact between incarceration and prosecution and all these different things. And every crime has an associated cost. It's not about the cost. I'm not saying that, it's about saving money. But if you look at how these costs, there's tangible costs and there's intangible costs. The intangible costs are the costs on families and loved ones and siblings, like I shared, that are completely avoidable. The movie that was covered last week, it's a 30-minute short film documentary, very, very well done. Amy Neville spearheaded that. George O'Connell, who's very philanthropic, he funded it as part of his efforts to keep these things in the forefront. But when I started I watched the film before. They gave me an advanced preview, and I watched it again with the audience. And I said, that's a great film that never had to be made. If you really think about it, it's a phenomenal film that never had to be made. Every one of those lives lost were completely avoidable, right? And these are people that were taking pills. All of them were a pill loss, and every one of them was taking a Percocet, a Xanax, a OxyContin.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you how just prolific this issue is. And I bet if you polled the general public at large, you might find 1 out of 10 people who know that fentanyl is a crisis.
Right.
Because there's just this ostrich head in the sand mentality that if I don't acknowledge it, it will never happen to me. If you don't acknowledge it, there's a high probability it will happen to you if you have kids.
Well, you were saying when you were in Spain, they never heard about fentanyl out here.
We were in Spain and we were talking about it.
None of the people had heard about the fentanyl crisis. And
I think that's true. It's not only true just in Spain. If you go to Portugal and some other countries, you'll hear the same thing, that they don't have this there. But then you have to go back and you have to look laterally, country to country, from a policy perspective. How prolific is drug use there? What are the drug crimes for trafficking?
Yeah.
Right. You get there. I bet you in Spain, it's got some very steep penalties for trafficking narcotics.
Portugal, isn't everything legal there?
Oh, I don't know. It might be that country.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a podcast that I wish never existed, to be honest with you. I would way rather have my son-in-law with us. I wouldn't have had the pleasure of, meeting Jonathan and Natalie, and I wouldn't have had the pleasure of sitting down on a podcast with you. But, I'd give all that up to not have my family go through what we went through.
Yeah.
And, my daughter still struggles. It's been, 17 months, and it's rough. It was the first love she ever knew. 15 years old. They were together, and at 21, she found him dead. Yeah, man, I can really relate to that, and but at the same time, I'm not gonna let his death be in vain, and I get to do stuff like this now, and I get to work with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and be a part of a bigger picture together, and on a level that I never thought I'd have that the sheriff of Orange County, or any sheriff for that matter.
You a couple times you offered apologies for the former you, and I will tell you something. If the deputies, the personnel who you dealt with years ago were here, every one of them would say congratulations. Yeah, congratulations for fixing your faults, and for acknowledging it, and being a better you, being the you probably always were, but you had some challenges along the way. None of them would have looked at you back then and said, I've never looked at somebody and said, they're just an addict. It's just not in my thought process. I've looked at people and said, there's an opportunity. We have to look at the opportunity and our ability to deal with other people, and look for a chance where you can have some change in that might stick, right? It doesn't always. No. A lot of times it doesn't. I've arrested the same people a lot of times over and over again, right? But it was never, you're wasting my time or what's wrong with you. It's and we're going to go through this again, and you hope that over time, things.
Yeah, hopefully.
I will say I did have the opportunity. One day I was pulling into the Starbucks on Ortega Highway, just down the street right here, and 6 of the guys were standing out in front of the Starbucks, and I was with Donna.
No way.
And I was pulling up, and I was just gonna sit in the car, and she pulled up, and she pulled right in the parking spot, right in front of them, and I was like, great. This is my opportunity. I was super nervous. I get out of the car. I walk in with Donna. I didn't say anything. One of the guys said, "Hi, Chad. How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing really good." I went in, got the Starbucks with Donna, and I came out, and all 6 of them were still standing there. And I walked up to them, and I said, "You know what? Thank you guys for saving my life." And I said, I apologize for giving you guys the runaround for a couple of years, and you having to, getting to do your job, I guess.
Right.
And you know what? The head guy, the sergeant, I don't know what level rank he is, but he's the head guy here in San Juan area, was at the time. And he said, I'm really proud of you. And I got in the car and I drove away, and I felt good, and I haven't.
That's freaking awesome.
I haven't been pulled over since.
And good for you for getting out of the car and seizing the moment. Because you could have just been like, Donna, go ahead and get us coffee.
There's no way I wasn't getting out of the car. That would have looked suspicious, man. It would have been like, there was no way I wasn't getting out of the car.
And they're like, ma'am, are you okay?
Yeah.
Well, I know that through your life and what you do to maintain your sobriety is a process. And my hope is that along the same vein, you acknowledge those who've been influential in your life and helped lift you through those tough times, because there's a little bit of affirmation that comes in that for you. It's, you did a lot of this on your own, but you didn't do all of it on your own. You had to have support systems that carried you when necessary. But it also does something else. It acknowledges and affirms the other person that they were involved in the outcome, and it actually encourages them to maybe do it more.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Bingo.
And that's what we need. We need more people to lift up others and carry them when necessary. My department has a phenomenal peer support program that was started about 15 years ago. And if you talk about going back to the previous years when you were growing up, and there was a lot of isolation that's in that. And the worst thing you can have in this profession, your profession as well, and what you're doing here, is this isolation of effort. And if you don't have somebody leaning on and talking to, because we deal with crisis, we deal with people's bad days all day long. There's no free puppy day in the sheriff's department. Show up one day and it's all good news.
Right.
And we do a lot of good things. I'm not saying that we don't make a difference, But that affirmation
Yeah.
part of, we had a really good day today
Mm-hmm.
is, or put my way, I tell everybody, rule number one, everyone goes home. That's rule number one. Everyone goes home. And that's not everyone wearing a uniform. That's everyone.
Yeah.
If everyone goes home, that's a good day for all of us. Let's start there and then see what else we can do that makes a difference
That's
along
awesome.
the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there has to be that encouragement for people to get engaged. And I don't know what that looks like. It has a lot of different faces.
Mm-hmm.
At the dinner table, we talked about with your neighbor's kid, with sharing information. I'm a stat guy, so stats are it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
These are completely preventable outcomes if we educate people and get them to make better decisions, and we can drive that number back down.
Yep.
675 down from 717. That's a good change.
Yeah.
Considering how vertical that was going in years prior, but that's still 675 too many.
Yeah.
Right. We have to get that number way down, and if we can do that, I'd like to get it to 0 next year. That's a lofty goal, but if we can cut it down to 500 to 400 to 200, that would be a huge success.
Yeah.
Still too high, but we're heading in the right direction, hopefully.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank you
coming
so
by.
much.
Thank you. Thanks
Really
for having me.
appreciate your time.
This
Yeah,
was
Sheriff
amazing.
Barnes, thanks a lot,
Yeah.
brother. Appreciate it, man.
Well, I'm part of the family now,
yeah,
so
you are.
You are.
I feel
Yeah.
like I was sitting down
Yeah,
with
man.
three
I know.
three long.
Oh, I was also going to say, hey, if you ever need us to come
Yeah.
speak,
Yes, I'm glad you just said that
Oh.
because I was gonna say
Help in any
Whatever
way.
come-
come
do.
speak, help in
Yes.
any way,
Yeah.
talk to, people that are struggling. The Hopeaholics are there.
Great,
Yeah.
and I will definitely share the podcast.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thanks for your
much.
time.
Appreciate it.